Look around you. Observe the streets, the screens that consume the hours, the empty and predictable conversations. 99% of the people you cross paths with every day are fast asleep, even though they walk with their eyes open. They move by pure inertia within a labyrinth designed with surgical precision. This is a system whose sole objective is to keep them exhausted, distracted, and perpetually dissatisfied. They work without purpose to buy borrowed status, desperately seeking the validation of people they do not even respect deep down. They call this living, but it is simply chronic survival, a sentence on autopilot. This message is not for them. If you were to hand this knowledge to the masses, they would reject it immediately. They would label it as arrogance, coldness, or madness, because the absolute truth is always offensive to those who have built their entire identity upon a comforting lie. But you are here because you have felt a dissonance. You know in the depths of your most primitive instinct that the traditional script handed to you at birth is broken. You have felt the fierce hunger for a higher standard, an excellence that does not settle for the crumbs of comfort the system offers in exchange for your docility. This is the starting point of your transformation. Here you will not find cheap motivation, pats on the back, or sterile formulas to impress the crowd. True power never needs to exhibit itself. The lifestyle of the true elite is not based on noisy exhibitionism or showing empty luxuries to the world. It is grounded in the absolute curation of their reality. It is about designing an environment of silence, beauty, and relentless order. It is the absolute mastery of the private. It is operating in the shadows, building a mental and material fortress that the chaos of the outside world simply cannot penetrate. The 1% does not compete in the rat race. The 1% owns the maze and watches from above. What you have before you is a definitive escape manual. Throughout these chapters, we will perform a systematic uninstallation of all the viruses of scarcity, fear, and the need for approval that have been injected into you since childhood. You will learn to regain total control over the most valuable currency in existence. This currency is not cash, but your indivisible attention. You will discover how to shield your emotional frequency, how to strategically isolate yourself from the collective noise, and how to execute your visions with a coldness that will leave the rest paralyzed. You are about to cross an invisible line of no return. Once you clearly see the strings that move the puppets, you will never again be able to sit among the audience and applaud the show. Close all your distractions. Silence the outside world. The secret that 99% of humanity will never understand is about to be unveiled before you. Welcome to the 1%. Chapter 1. The Great Illusion. The Design of the Labyrinth. The greatest trap into which 99% of humanity falls is believing that the world is an accidental chaos. When they see economic crises, inflation, collective stress, and empty lives, they think the system is broken, or that leaders are simply incompetent. This is the first great lie you must uninstall from your mind to reclaim your sovereignty. The system is not failing, it is functioning perfectly. Imagine for a moment a farmer raising cattle. The farmer does not hate his cows, but he does not wish for them to be free either. He designs precise fences, calculates the exact amount of feed to keep them producing, and establishes predictable routines. To the cow, the fence is the totality of its reality. For the farmer, it is simple production architecture. The modern world is an immense psychological and economic labyrinth designed by brilliant minds with a single purpose: to extract your vital energy, your time, and your productive capacity, giving you back in return the minimum amount of comfort necessary so that you do not rebel. You do not need iron bars to build a perfect prison. You only need to convince the prisoner that he is free, because he can choose which series to watch on Friday night or which brand of phone to buy on credit. The great illusion is this false sense of agency. You wake up, choose your clothes, and drive the route that you decide. You believe you are in command, but you are operating within a source code that someone else wrote. As long as you do not understand the anatomy of this labyrinth, you will continue running through its corridors, exhausting yourself, hitting invisible walls, and wondering why, no matter how much you run, you always end up in the same place. The pillars of the labyrinth, how they keep you domesticated. For millions of human beings with highly evolved brains to accept living mediocre and repetitive existences, the system needs to anesthetize them. A human being with energy, focus, and freedom is a threat to the established order. Therefore, the labyrinth stands on three fundamental pillars that operate simultaneously against you. 1. Tiredness as a tool of containment. Chronic fatigue is not an accident of the modern lifestyle. It is a defense mechanism of the system. An exhausted man does not have the cognitive capacity to question his reality or plan an escape. When you work 40, 50, or 60 hours a week, you reach the end of the day in a state of survival. Your prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain in charge of strategic thinking, long-term vision, and creativity, shuts down for lack of energy. You operate from your reptilian brain, and a reptile only seeks three things: food, shelter, and immediate rest. The system squeezes you until the last drop of vitality, ensuring you have no strength to escape. 2. Distraction and the engineering of emptiness. If tiredness neutralizes your body, distraction neutralizes your mind. Never in the history of humanity have we been subjected to such a savage bombardment of stimuli. However, they are not giving you information. They are giving you synthetic dopamine to keep you occupied. Social media algorithms, 24/7 news cycles, and the infinite entertainment industry are the hall of mirrors in the labyrinth. They are designed by behavioral engineers to hijack your attention, which is the most valuable resource in the universe. While you are outraged by political news you cannot control, you are yielding control of your consciousness. Constant entertainment is the morphine the system injects into you, so that you do not feel the pain of wasted talent and a stagnant life. When you are distracted, you do not have to face the silence. And it is in absolute silence where empires are born. The system terrifies the masses with silence, because in quietude the human begins to ask questions. 3. Debt, the shackle of future time. The ancient slave knew he was a slave because he wore chains on his ankles. The modern slave does not see his chains because they are made of paper and digits on a screen. The financial system has sold you the poisonously brilliant idea that debt is a form of purchasing power to be used now. When you sign a 5-year loan to buy a car that will lose its value as soon as you start it, you are not committing your money. You are selling hours of a life you have not yet lived. You are mortgaging your future self and handing it over to a banking institution. Debt is the definitive lock of the labyrinth used to hold you in place. A man without debt can afford the luxury of quitting a humiliating job, can take the risk of starting a business or moving away. An indebted man is terrified. He has to obey, he has to bow his head, and he has to keep running on the wheel, because next month the installment will fall due inexorably. The system does not lend you money, it buys your courage. The anatomy of the rat race, movement without progress. The masses call life a process of mere sustained biological degradation. What the 99% experience daily is not life, it is the rat race. Imagine a spinning wheel inside a cage. The rodent runs frantically, burning calories, sweating, feeling like it is moving at full speed, but its landscape never changes at all. The anatomy of this race is predictable and tragic. You sell your time for a linear salary. With that salary, you pay taxes to the government. You pay the accumulated debt of a lifestyle you use to impress other rats in other wheels. With the little that is left, you buy weekend distractions to anesthetize the frustration of the work week. On Monday, the cycle restarts, but you are a week older and have less energy. In this operating level, there is no accumulation of power, no design of legacy, no expansion of consciousness. There is only maintenance. The individual becomes a simple channel through which money flows. It enters through effort and leaves toward the owners. Living, in the definition of the elite, of the true 1%, means operating with asymmetry. It is disconnecting your income from your time. It is waking up and having the day's agenda be a blank canvas that you paint at will. It is using your intellect to build systems, not to operate the levers of someone else's machine for a wage. The script of the 99%, the rules you obey unknowingly. To exit the labyrinth, you must first map it. The system has programmed your mind with a script of life that the masses recite as if it were a natural law. These are the invisible rules that you have blindly obeyed and that guarantee your permanence in the collective mediocrity. Rule 1. Seek security above all else, above risk. From school, you are taught to have terror of failure and risk. You are programmed to seek the safe job, the fixed salary, and retirement. They hide from you that in the modern economy, supposed security is the greatest of illusions. An employee can lose his livelihood in a second by the decision of a board of directors he does not know. Rule 2. Consumption equals success. The system has merged your sense of self-esteem with your capacity for consumption. It makes you believe that leveling up in life means buying a larger house to fill it with useless things. The 99% compete in a status tournament based on brands. The real 1% compete in a tournament of freedom. Rule 3. Martyr sacrifice is virtue. They have instilled in you that suffering and exhausting your body in the name of a corporation is something noble. False. It is convenient for the shareholder, not for you. Confusing intelligent effort, which builds empires, with blind sacrifice, which only wears out bones, is the signature of the slave. The breaking of the trance, the architect's first move. Recognizing the existence of the labyrinth is brutal. It causes deep cognitive dissonance. When you finally see the bars, when you realize that you have been running in the wheel for years, the natural reaction is anger or depression. But here lies the secret that separates those who complain from those who escape the trap. The first mental step to breaking the rules is not to quit your job in a fit of rage. It is not to go fight the system or try to wake up the other rats. They will hate you for it. The first move of the sovereign is strategic dissociation. You must enter observer mode. From today, you keep your job, but mentally, you are not there. You emotionally detach yourself from the avatar that is inside the labyrinth. You start looking at your own life from above, like an architect looking at a blueprint. When your boss demands something unreasonable, you no longer feel the pressure of the slave. You observe the power dynamic with analytical coldness. When an advertisement tries to provoke a need for purchase, you smile internally, recognizing the psychological trick, and decide not to take the bait. When your friends of the 99% complain about the government or their bad luck, you sink into a deep silence, knowing that they belong to a frequency you have disconnected from. This is the birth of singularity in you. It is the moment the victim dies and the strategist is born. You have stopped being the piece on the board that is moved by invisible hands. Now, standing in the shadows, in the most absolute mental quietude, you are preparing to become the player. You are ready to begin the dismantling. The false war, the theater of shadows, and the division of the masses. Once you have dissociated from the wheel and begin to observe the labyrinth from above, you will notice a control mechanism even more perverse than exhaustion or debt: the engineering of conflict. The system knows that, despite being tired and indebted, the human being possesses an unquenchable spark of frustration. If that frustration were directed toward the true architects of the labyrinth, the walls would fall in a matter of days. To prevent this, the system has built an immense virtual and social coliseum where 99% spend the little energy they have left fighting each other. They present you with a menu of false dichotomies. They offer left against right, rich against poor, one generation against another, or one gender against the other. They force you to choose a side, to put on a label, and to defend it with religious fanaticism. This is the false war. While the masses tear their garments discussing sterile ideologies, the true 1% watches from the VIP stands. They do not participate in the public debate. They finance both sides of the arena, sell the ideological weapons, and, above all, harvest the scattered attention of the masses. Involving yourself in the collective drama is the supreme act of submission. When you are outraged by a headline, you are surrendering your sovereignty to an algorithm. The architect of his own reality has no opinions on matters over which he has no direct control. Understand this well. Having an opinion on every global tragedy or social debate does not make you informed or virtuous. It makes you an easy target and a pawn. To exit the labyrinth, you must declare your absolute neutrality. Your energy is a sacred, finite, and non-renewable resource. Every drop of anger you spend arguing with strangers is energy you are stealing from the construction of your own empire. Strategic silence is not ignorance. It is the ultimate demonstration of power. It is saying, your show is irrelevant to my conquest. The mercantilization of awakening, the VIP cell. The system is a highly intelligent and adaptable cybernetic organism. It knows that sooner or later, some prisoners will realize they are in a prison. Its response to this awakening is not violent repression. That would be inefficient. The response of the system is the mercantilization of the awakening. The labyrinth absorbs dissent and sells it back to you as a product. You realize consumerism is toxic, so the system sells you minimalism as a new lifestyle with its own expensive products. You realize the traditional health system makes you sick, so it sells you the wellness industry and spiritual supplements. Suddenly, thousands of gurus appear packaging the red pill and charging you for a plastic rebellion. You think you have escaped because you consume alternative content, but you are still a consumer. The system has simply moved you from the sleeping cell to the VIP cell of the awake. It still profits from your attention. The true rebellion is not aesthetic, does not use hashtags, and does not seek the validation of a group of enlightened ones. Genuine rebellion is invisible and based on asymmetric production. It is the individual who silently builds income streams disconnected from time, shields their privacy, and stops consuming to start creating. The tyranny of false urgency, the neurochemical trap. To keep you trapped, the labyrinth must distort your perception of time. It achieves this through the tyranny of false urgency. The modern world is designed to keep you in a constant state of fight or flight. Red notifications on your phone, high-priority emails, and breaking news every 15 minutes are the tools. They make you believe everything is for now, and that if you do not respond immediately, you will lose an opportunity or be excluded. This is a neurochemical trick. When your brain is flooded with adrenaline and cortisol from this false urgency, it is physically incapable of long-term thinking. You cannot plan an empire this way. The 99% live by reacting. They are firefighters putting out fires that others have started. The 1% operates with deliberation. The true owners of the world do not react. They dictate the rhythm. A sovereign does not check his phone because it vibrated. He decides when to grant his attention to the machine. Breaking this invisible rule requires you to develop a frigid tolerance for social pressure. You must be willing to let emails wait and calls go to voicemail. You must learn to differentiate between what is noisily urgent and what is silently important. Your freedom is built in the blocks of uninterrupted time you seize, the rewriting of the concept of freedom. If you ask 100 people in the labyrinth what freedom is, they will give you answers the system has implanted. They will say it is taking a vacation or choosing between 20 brands of vehicles. That is not freedom. That is variety of options within the cage. It is the freedom to choose the color of your shackles. True freedom is not uninhibited pleasure. The freedom of the sovereign is divided into 3 absolute axes. Geographic freedom, the capacity to be where you want. Temporal freedom, being the absolute owner of your 24 hours. And freedom of rejection, the financial and psychological capacity to say no. The man who cannot say no because he needs the money remains a slave, regardless of how many zeros are on the check. To reach this level, you must stop pursuing freedom as a feeling and start building it as a structure. Freedom is not desired. It is financed, protected, and exercised with military discipline. The final verdict, the death of the labyrinth dweller. Accepting this reality is accepting the death of a version of yourself. The old you, the labyrinth dweller who believed the system was fair or waited to be saved by a politician, must be buried today. That mentality is radioactive and cannot accompany you in the next phase of your evolution. From this moment on, you assume command as the infiltrator. You are in the world, but no longer of the world. You will use the roads, the banks, and the internet of the system, but under your own rules. You stop being the prey to become the strategic predator of opportunities. You have recognized the prison. You have located the door. But to open it, you will need to understand how the true economy of power works. The system has deceived you into chasing paper bills, while they steal the only asset that cannot be printed or recovered. You are ready to dominate the raw material of kings. Chapter 2. The invisible currency, what they are really stealing from you. If you walk down the most dangerous street in your city, you will instinctively protect your wallet. You will look around with suspicion, secure your pockets, and avoid any interaction. You are jealous of your bills, your cards, and your physical phone. However, every day, from the moment you open your eyes until you collapse into bed, You leave the door of your mind wide open for armies of corporations, media outlets, and algorithms to enter and plunder the most valuable asset you possess, your attention. The system has achieved the most masterful deception in economic history, convincing billions of human beings that money is the supreme resource. They have taught you to measure your value based on the zeros in a bank account and to sacrifice your health. But stop to analyze the nature of money. Modern money is fiat currency. It is infinite. Central banks print it by pressing a button on a keyboard. If a resource can be created out of thin air by a handful of bureaucrats, it cannot be the most valuable. The true elite, the architects who operate above the labyrinth, know that money is simply a low-level exchange tool. They use money to buy and protect their true wealth. The invisible currency is composed of two finite, divine elements, your time and your attention. The subject exchanges his time and attention to get money. The sovereign uses money to buy time and shield his attention. That is the unbridgeable gap. If you do not understand this, you will continue to be a donor in a hospital where the doctors are vampires. The physics of attention, the reality-creating lens. To understand why your attention is so coveted, we must move from economics to physics. At the quantum level, matter exists in a state of probability until it is observed. The act of paying attention forces reality to collapse into a physical and concrete form. Attention is the vital energy channeled through focus. It is the laser with which the human being carves the marble block of the universe. Where you put your attention, you put your life. What you observe grows. What you ignore withers and dies. Your attention is the fuel that makes things exist in your personal universe. If you spend 3 hours a day focusing on news of economic tragedies, your brain will crystallize a reality of panic. If you focus on celebrities, you are transferring your energy. You are acting like a broken lantern that scatters its light in all directions, illuminating the trash instead of focusing a lethal beam. Silicon Valley did not build social platforms to connect you. They built them to mine human attention on an industrial scale. When an application is free, it is because the product is you. Specifically, the product is the ability of your eyes and brain to stay fixed on a screen. They sell fragments of your consciousness to advertisers. Every scroll is a hemorrhage of wealth. A man who cannot keep his attention fixed on a single task for 90 minutes without checking his phone is an intellectually castrated man. He cannot build an empire because he lacks the gravitational force necessary to hold complex ideas together. The engineering of neurochemical hijacking. Do not feel guilty if you find it hard to concentrate. You are fighting against entire laboratories of neuroscientists whose only job is to hack your reward system. The human brain evolved to seek novelty because, in ancient times, it guaranteed survival. Every time we discovered something useful, the brain released dopamine. The modern digital labyrinth has hijacked this mechanism. The design of an infinite feed is identical to a slot machine. They operate under the principle of variable intermittent reward. You do not know what you are going to see when you slide your finger across the screen. That uncertainty is what shoots dopamine through the roof and generates addiction. The problem is that dopamine is a finite resource in the short term. When you exhaust your dopamine reserves by consuming empty stimuli first thing in the morning, you enter a state of neurochemical deficit. When the time comes to do deep work, your brain rebels because creation requires effort and dopamine takes time to arrive. Thus, the system keeps you poor. They do not need to forbid you from building companies. They only need to make your brain biologically incapable of tolerating the boredom and friction that the creation of greatness requires. The myth of multitasking, voluntary stupidity. The corporate system popularized one of the most destructive lies: multitasking. They made you believe that doing 3 things at once was a symbol of efficiency. Neuroscience has shown that the conscious brain cannot perform 2 complex tasks simultaneously. What you actually do is switch tasking. Every time you switch focus from an email to a message and back, your brain pays a toll called attention residue. If you do this dozens of times, you end up operating with a tiny fraction of your IQ. You become stupid. The fragmentation of attention is the #1 enemy of excellence. Elite creators operate under the law of total immersion. When a sovereign decides to execute an action, The rest of the universe ceases to exist. He enters a state of flow. If you allow the world to fragment your attention, you are accepting being mediocre. Multitasking is the way slaves try to juggle the demands of their amos. The architect does one thing at a time with such intensity that his result is worth that of 100 men. The stimulus fast, reclaiming mental strength. To reclaim your invisible currency, you must implement a relentless defense protocol. You must become the armed guardian of your own mind. The recovery of cognitive sovereignty is achieved through a stimulus fast or a strategic dopamine detox. The 1% imposes titanium barriers between its attention and digital thieves. This is the protocol. Push notifications are dog collars. A king does not answer the bell. Deactivate all notifications. You decide when you go to the information. It does not come to you. The way you spend the first hour after waking dictates the tone of your day. If you immediately absorb the chaos of the world, you have handed over your kingdom. The first 2 hours belong to the architect for reading, exercise, planning, and silence. Stop consuming information that does not provide power. Just as you would not eat from a dumpster, do not follow people you do not admire. Purge your digital environment. At first, you will feel withdrawal and anxiety. Endure it. Those are your chains breaking. Time is a space for conquest, chronological asymmetry. We must address the second half of the invisible currency, your time. The system taught you the formula of poverty, hours worked, money earned. Under this paradigm, your wealth is limited by your biology. If you charge by the hour, you have a glass ceiling. The elite understand time as gravity and investment space. For the sovereign, time is the fertile ground where asymmetric work is planted. Asymmetry means disconnecting effort from the result. The worker builds a chair and charges for a one-to-one relationship. The architect invests 100 hours designing software. He charges nothing then, but when finished, it can be sold to millions while he sleeps. That is a 1-to-1,000,000 relationship. The system steals your time by keeping you too busy to build these systems. The true price of anything you buy is the amount of life, time, you had to exchange to get it. When you buy a car on credit, you are signing a contract of servitude. You cede your mornings and vital energy for years to a corporation for a piece of devaluing metal. The architect uses money to buy back his time. He delegates the trivial and pays for tools that save him months. He knows that if he concentrates his attention for a sufficient block of time, he can alter the course of his family history forever. False productivity, the art of being busy while being poor. The labyrinth has a secondary trap. Hustle culture. The system tells you that if you are not sleeping, you must be working. They glorify being always busy. They have made you believe that exhaustion is a badge of honor, but this is a dangerous illusion. Being busy is not being productive. It is often a symptom of intellectual laziness. It is the inability to sit in silence to prioritize what is truly important. 99% of people confuse movement with action. Movement makes you feel you are working. Movement is redesigning a logo or having endless meetings. Action, on the other hand, is launching the product or making the sales call. Action moves the needle of the empire. Movement only makes the wheels spin in the mud. The system wants movement. The sovereign agenda has white spaces. These are strategic thinking buffers. Real wealth is created by thinking more deeply than others. If you are so busy cutting wood that you never sharpen the axe, you will end up with destroyed arms and half the work done. To reclaim your currency, audit your day with cruelty. Eliminate fake work. If a task has no asymmetric potential, delegate or ignore it. Excellence requires you to accept that many small things must burn so that the masterpiece can be born. The compound interest of attention, the mathematics of the elite. If money is governed by compound interest, your invisible currency is governed by cognitive compound interest. Every time you focus, you make a micro-investment. Your brain changes its structure based on what it experiences repeatedly. When the masses invest in memes and hate, they wire their brains for impulsivity. Their capital devalues. The 1% understands that focused attention has a devastating multiplier effect. Imagine investing 1 daily hour of attention in mastering a high-value skill. The first month, progress is invisible. The inhabitant of the labyrinth quits here. But by year 3, your skill becomes an asymmetric asset. Success is the predictable result of directing a laser beam toward a single point until the reality catches fire. The system wants you to diversify your attention in trivial directions so you never pierce the surface. Your defense is selective ignorance. To be extraordinary, you must be ignorant of what does not matter. Your attention must be in assets that produce dividends. Social vampirism and the defense of sovereign space. The invisible currency is also stolen by your environment. We live in a society that has normalized social vampirism. Modern culture dictates that you must be available. If someone sends a message, you are expected to respond in minutes. People allow these assaults because they fear not being nice. They sabotage their destiny to avoid incommoding a vampire. The sovereign operates under strategic inaccessibility. Truly powerful people are hard to contact. They build moats around their castle. To protect your currency, establish limits of cold steel. Use the default no. For any request for your time, your automatic response is no, unless it offers clear asymmetric value. Accustom others to the fact that you respond only on your own terms. The social vampire will be offended. They will call you arrogant. That is the filter you need. Those who do not respect your time do not respect your life. By becoming inaccessible to mediocrity, you become hyper-available for excellence. Chronological singularity, the handover of power. You have reached the turning point. You have discovered that the blood of the system is your time and fragmented attention. Chronological singularity occurs when your perception of time reverses. You stop seeing hours as something to kill. You begin to see every second as a block of granite with which you build your fortress. The subject kills time. The architect says, time is the canvas, attention is the chisel. Today you declare bankruptcy for the mass entertainment system. Every hour must be audited. Is this action expanding my sovereignty? You have closed the doors to the invisible thieves. With your attention curated and your time under command, you are ready to mold the physical world. The raw material is secured. Chapter 3. The Lifestyle of the 1%. Curation versus Exhibitionism. To understand the majesty of curation, we must first dissect the pathology of exhibitionism. The modern system has achieved a terrifying psychological victory. It has convinced the masses that an experience has no real value unless it is witnessed, validated, and applauded by an audience of strangers. We have turned human existence into a gigantic play where 99% of the population acts simultaneously, desperate to capture the attention of an audience that, ironically, is too busy acting out its own play to pay any real attention. This is the Colosseum of vanity. People have merged their self-esteem with the algorithm. If they visit a beautiful place, their first instinct is not to breathe the air, absorb the architecture, or feel the temperature of the environment. Their first instinct is to pull out a glass screen to document that they are there. They have stopped living in the first person to become film directors of a low-budget movie about their own lives. The labyrinth pushes you toward exhibitionism because an individual who needs external validation is an infinitely manipulable individual. If your joy depends on likes or the envious looks of your contemporaries, you are a slave to their opinions. Corporations know this. They sell you products not for their utility or their intrinsic excellence, but for the signaling value that those products have. They sell you the giant logo on the t-shirt, the unnecessarily roaring car, and the phone recognizable from 10 meters away so that you can shout to the world, "Look at me, I exist, I have value." But true power is mute. The elite, the 1% who really pull the strings of reality, watch this circus with a mixture of clinical fascination and silent contempt. They know that when you have to shout your status, it is because deep down you know it does not belong to you. Exhibitionism is the defense mechanism of the insecure, the paper shield of those who are empty inside. To escape this trap, you must abandon the Colosseum. You must renounce the applause. You must learn the dark and refined discipline of curation. The definition of the sovereign: private curation over public validation. What is curation? In the art world, a curator is not the one who paints the picture, nor the one who shouts at the gallery door for people to enter. The curator is the mastermind who selects, organizes, and protects. He is the one who decides which pieces have a high enough standard to enter the museum and which pieces must be incinerated. The curator works with space, with light, with silence, and with the void. The lifestyle of the 1% is not an accumulation of shiny objects. It is the relentless application of this curator mentality to your own existence. It is about designing an environment of absolute excellence that exists solely and exclusively for your own psychological, intellectual, and aesthetic benefit. 99% decorate their homes thinking about visitors. They buy furniture that looks good in photographs but is uncomfortable. The sovereign designs his home as a fortress of optimization. The texture of the sheets he sleeps on, the exact temperature of the lighting in his study, the weight of the pen with which he writes his strategies, everything is meticulously selected to reduce mental friction and elevate his state of consciousness. He doesn't care if no one else sees it. In fact, he prefers that no one else sees it. Private curation means that you do things right when no one is watching you. It is the supreme respect for oneself. If you drink a glass of wine alone on a Tuesday night, you do not drink it in a plastic cup in front of the television. You serve the wine in a proper crystal glass, sit in silence, and experience the flavor. You don't do it to take a picture. You do it because your standard of living does not degrade simply because there are no spectators. That is the difference between real prestige and a cheap facade. Real prestige is structural. The facade crumbles in intimacy. The lifestyle fallacy. The power of absence. The corporate system and social networks have deeply corrupted the meaning of the word lifestyle. They have established the false belief that projecting a great lifestyle requires becoming a walking reality show. They have convinced millions that to be perceived as value creators or authority figures, they must record their trips to the beach, meticulously document the food they taste in trendy restaurants, and show off the outfits they wear to go to those places. That is the subject's manual. Documenting the daily routine is not projecting a lifestyle, it is begging for relevance. Showing what you eat or what clothes you wear to go to the sea is a desperate cry that says, "Please, confirm that my leisure time is enviable." The 1% categorically rejects this practice. They understand a fundamental psychological law. Excessive familiarity breeds contempt, and total exposure annihilates mystery. When you show every detail of your intimacy, your meals, your walks, and your wardrobe, you strip yourself of your aura of authority. You become common. You become predictable. You become a fast-moving consumer product for the masses swiping a finger across a screen. The true sovereign protects his intimacy with obsidian walls. His lifestyle is not demonstrated by showing his plate of food. It is demonstrated through the density of his thought, the impeccability of his work, and the weight of his presence. You can project the most enviable, sophisticated, and powerful lifestyle in the world without ever showing the inside of your room or your vacation destination. It is achieved by curating the aesthetics of your ideas. The true elite creator appears on stage, delivers devastating value, projects a curated image of absolute excellence, and then disappears into the shadows. He gives no explanations. He does not show behind the scenes. By hiding the mundane, outings, food, beachwear, you force the minds of others to fill that void with awe and respect. Mystery is the most undervalued asset in the era of overexposure. The absence of personal information is what builds legends. The aesthetics of the void, environmental engineering. If you want to think like an architect of reality, you must start with the physical space you inhabit. The environment is not a passive container. It is an extension of your neurology. A space cluttered with useless objects, tangled cables, piled-up clothes, and meaningless decorations is the physical equivalent of static noise on a radio. It constantly drains your subconscious energy. 99% suffer from horror vacui, the fear of empty space. They fill every shelf, every wall, and every drawer with knickknacks because empty space makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to face themselves. The 1%, on the contrary, adore the void. The void is the ultimate luxury because the void represents infinite potential and freedom of movement. Environmental engineering dictates that every object you allow into your living space must meet one of two non-negotiable requirements. Either it is a precision tool that optimizes your empire, or it is a piece of profound aesthetics that elevates your spirit. If it is neither, it is trash, and trash must be expelled from the court. Imagine the study of a dynastic leader. You will not find a dozen half-used plastic pens. You will find a single writing instrument, perfectly balanced and masterfully designed. You will not find piles of irrelevant papers. You will find clear surfaces of pure wood or cold stone. This aesthetic of the void is not commercial minimalism, designed for magazines. It is an armaments cleanup. By eliminating visual and physical friction from your environment, you free up mental processors that can now be used for asymmetric strategy and relentless decision-making. Your environment must be an aerodynamic sanctuary that recharges you, not a warehouse of nostalgia that overwhelms you. Silent luxury, the death of the logo. Within the design of your environment and your persona, we must address the anatomy of material status. The system has designed a fraudulent status ladder. At the bottom of the ladder is poverty. In the middle is the middle class that buys brands with gigantic logos printed on their chests to prove they are no longer poor. It is noisy luxury, status bought on credit. At the top of the ladder, where the 1% operates, exists silent luxury. When you reach the level of true sovereignty, the need to use your body as a billboard for a European fashion house disappears. The architect does not wear logos, because the architect knows that he is the brand. Wearing another man's name printed on your chest is submitting your identity to his. The lifestyle of the elite focuses on material mastery, not mass recognition. Curating your appearance means investing in exquisite quality fabrics, cashmere, pure linen, virgin wool, silk, cut with geometric precision that adapts to your body like armor. The colors are sober, timeless, and lethal. Deep blacks, charcoal grays, midnight blues, icy whites. This approach sends a devastating message in any room you enter. The untrained eye of the masses will not know how much what you are wearing costs, because there are no labels to read. But the trained eye of other members of the 1% will immediately recognize the drape of the fabric and the quality of the manufacturing. By adopting silent luxury, you become invisible to fools and magnetic to kings. You select your audience through the very fabric of your clothes. That is true curation, a level of excellence so dense that only those who belong to your same frequency can decode it. The diet of the architect. Curation of mental inputs. Lifestyle is not limited to what you wear or where you sit. It is fundamentally what you allow to enter your brain. Just as we purge the physical environment of useless objects, we must purge the intellectual environment of parasitic ideas. You are the exact average of the stimuli you consume. 99% have a mental diet based on informational junk food. News of tragedies they cannot control, hallway rumors, sterile conspiracy theories, and hyper-stimulating entertainment. All this is designed to generate spikes in cortisol, stress, and dopamine, cheap pleasure. This diet produces obese, slow, and scared minds. The lifestyle of the 1% demands a fierce curation of information. The sovereign operates under strategic ignorance. He does not read daily news because he understands that the 24-hour news cycle is a business model based on outrage. If an event is truly critical on a global or financial level, the information will reach him through his iron circle. Instead of consuming the foam of the present, the architect consumes the rock of the past and the blueprints of the future. He reads the classics, Stoic philosophy, military strategy manuals, biographies of empire builders, and technical analyses of his industry. His mental diet is nutrient-dense. By curating his inputs, his mind becomes a vault of sharpened mental models. When faced with a problem, he does not react with the panic of the news-infected masses. He reacts with the coldness of Marcus Aurelius or the cunning of Machiavelli, because that is the information that lives in his blood. The art of exclusion, raising the standard by elimination. The fundamental difference between the novice collector and the expert curator is that the novice is obsessed with adding, while the curator is obsessed with eliminating. Designing a lifestyle of excellence does not require you to immediately earn millions of dollars to start buying expensive things. It requires you to have the courage to radically eliminate everything mediocre around you. Excellence is a process of subtraction. If you have 10 pairs of mediocre shoes that hurt you or look worn out, curation demands that you throw 9 in the trash and keep only the pair that is in perfect condition. Suddenly, your standard has just risen to 100%. If your closet has 40 garments of which you only use 5 that make you feel invincible, eliminate the remaining 35. Entering your closet will no longer be an experience of friction. It will be arming yourself for daily war with your best weapons. This law of subtraction applies to everything. If you go to a restaurant, don't order the all-you-can-eat buffet where you eat volume without quality. Order the most refined dish on the menu, eat it slowly, and leave. If you're going to have a conversation, don't talk for 2 hours about banalities. Talk for 20 minutes about high-impact ideas, and then withdraw into silence. The lifestyle of the 1% is the mastery of the few but exceptional. When you eliminate mediocrity from your range of vision, your subconscious recalibrates. It begins to understand that in this realm, more or less okay is unacceptable. By surrounding yourself only with elements, habits, and objects curated to the highest level, you raise your internal thermostat. When the environment demands greatness, the mind and body have no choice but to adapt to that frequency. The ritual of solitude, the forge of character. Exhibitionism requires constant company, whether physical or digital. The slave of validation withers if he spends a weekend alone. He feels his life is meaningless if there is no one there to confirm he exists. For the sovereign, solitude is not a punishment. It is a sacred ritual. It is the forge where the steel of character is tempered. Designing an elite lifestyle requires you to fall in love with strategic seclusion. It is in isolation where true curation occurs. When you are alone, free from the gazes, expectations, and noise of other people, you can hear the frequency of your own intuition. It is the moment when you stop absorbing and begin to synthesize. True emperors in history had inner sanctuaries that no one else could access. You need to create that space, whether it's a physical room in your house or a non-negotiable block of time in the early morning. In that space, there are no phones, no internet, no distractions. It is you and the blank paper. It is you and your darkest and brightest thoughts. The ability to be absolutely still, in silence, and find a fierce peace in your own company is the hallmark of the 1%. He who cannot stand his own presence will end up surrounding himself with fools to anesthetize the silence. He who masters the ritual of solitude becomes invulnerable. When you go out into the world after having nourished yourself in curated silence, you carry a gravity that others perceive immediately. You are not in a hurry. You do not need to please. You are anchored in the bedrock of your own being. Transmutation of energy, from spectator to creator of worlds. The last step in the evolution from exhibitionism to curation is the total transmutation of how you interact with reality. 99% define themselves as consumers or spectators. They watch the series others write, wear the clothes others design, listen to the music others compose, and react to the rules others dictate. The lifestyle of the 1% is the absolute transition from spectator to creator. Curating your environment, your clothing, your information, and your time has only one ultimate goal: to build the perfect machinery so that you can create asymmetric value. You are not cleaning your desk to make it look pretty. You are cleaning it to write the code that will change your industry. You are not dressing in silent luxury to feel superior. You do it to eliminate decision fatigue and project the authority needed to close massive deals. You are not keeping silent about your private life out of paranoia. You are doing it to channel all that wasted energy into the execution of your empires. All the energy you previously lost trying to prove to the world who you were through exhibitionism is now directed inward, toward the reactor core of your mind. And when that reactor reaches critical mass, the result is not a photo on social media. The result is a work of art, a multi-million-dollar business, a literary work, or a system that alters the fabric of reality for thousands of people. The sovereign does not document his existence. The sovereign forces his will upon matter. His lifestyle is not a showcase for the curious. It is the engine room from which he commands his destiny. You have closed the curtain on the fake play. The Colosseum of vanity no longer counts on your presence. Now, in the majesty of curation and the void, the true work of the gods begins. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Isolation, the Power of the Void. Since the beginning of time, humanity has understood that physical diseases are transmitted by proximity. If you sit next to a man with the plague, sooner or later your lungs will fill with the same death. However, 99% of the population ignores a much more dangerous and lethal universal law: psychic contagion. Emotions, beliefs, fears, and mediocrity are highly infectious pathogens transmitted through social noise. When you immerse yourself in the crowd, your brain, biologically programmed for tribal survival, begins to synchronize with the frequency of those around you. If you walk among terrified sheep, your heart will beat with panic. The system knows this flaw in the human code and uses it to keep the masses in a perpetual hive mind. Social networks, stadiums, viral trends, and popular culture are nothing more than petri dishes where the viruses of conformity, outrage, and scarcity are cultivated and distributed. Public opinion is the lowest leveler of human intelligence. A man alone can be a thinking genius. That same man, inserted into an angry or scared mass, is reduced to the IQ of the stupidest member of the group. The mass does not think, the mass reacts. The mass does not plan 10 years ahead. The mass demands blood or bread for this very afternoon. The 1%, the sovereign elite, understands that proximity to the crowd is toxic to the intellect and the empire. Therefore, the first step to protecting the masterpiece of your life is recognizing that social noise is a biological attack against your potential. The architecture of isolation does not stem from misanthropy or hatred of humanity. It stems from an absolute hygienic necessity. It is the mandatory quarantine of the superior mind. The death of fads, the contempt for the ephemeral. The commercial labyrinth requires the wheel to keep turning. For this, the system has invented the concept of fashion or trend. Fashion is the artificial imposition of obsolescence. They tell you that what was valuable yesterday is ridiculous today, and what is indispensable today will be garbage tomorrow. This forces 99% to live in a state of perpetual pursuit, spending their time, attention, and money trying to belong to the vanguard of an illusion. They follow clothing trends, investment trends, ideological trends, and language trends. The subject deeply fears being left behind, labeled as outdated or irrelevant. That fear is the engine of his ruin. The architect looks at fads with the same icy contempt with which a lion looks at a fluttering insect. The 1% does not chase trends because they understand that trends are the trap of the poor. When a fad reaches public opinion, it has already been capitalized on by the creators at the top. The masses are only buying overpriced leftovers. Strategic isolation vaccinates you against this pursuit. By not being immersed in the noise of what everyone is doing, you become immune to FOMO, fear of missing out. The sovereign does not operate on the axis of the novel. He operates on the axis of the eternal. Instead of reading this month's self-help bestseller, he reads Seneca, Machiavelli, or the biographies of industry titans who have been relevant for centuries. Instead of investing in today's trending cryptocurrency, he invests in acquiring skills, land, or cash flow systems that have worked since the time of Babylon. Instead of adapting his vocabulary or aesthetics to the current generation's slang, he builds a personal brand based on the timelessness of silent luxury and relentless authority. By isolating yourself from fads, your energy stops dispersing in 6-month cycles and starts accumulating in decades. You become a mountain of granite. The fast from public opinion, immunity to judgment. One of the heaviest shackles the system places on the individual's mind is the dependence on external validation. From school, you are graded with marks. At work, you are evaluated with performance reviews. In social life, you are measured by likes, followers, and comments. The labyrinth trained you to believe your value depends on the herd. The architecture of isolation requires you to commit an act of absolute social heresy. Stop caring what others think. I do not mean the empty phrase from cheap motivation books. I mean a real psychological amputation of the complacency gene. Public opinion is unstable, hypocritical, and, above all, ignorant. 99% of people lack the discipline to govern their own lives, diets, or finances. Why should you allow them a vote on the board of directors of your destiny? If you receive financial advice from someone in debt, or life advice from someone living in mediocrity, listening to them is an act of sabotage. When you strategically isolate yourself from public judgment, a terrifying phenomenon occurs to others. You become uncontrollable. The system controls the masses through the fear of shame and the desire for applause. If you take away the world's power to shame you and renounce the need for applause, you have broken the puppet strings. The sovereign operates under the internal compass. If the architect decides to launch a project, isolate himself to study, or change the course of his empire, he does not take polls. He executes with the coldness of a mathematician. If the world applauds him, his ego does not inflate, because he knows the applause is smoke. If the world criticizes him, he does not sink, because he knows the criticism comes from spectators in the stands who lack the courage to enter the arena. Your empire is an absolute monarchy, not a democracy. Public opinion stops at the gates of your castle. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you leave a blank space, the universe will try to fill it. The error of the common individual is allowing the system to fill his void with noise. The genius of the 1% consists in protecting the void at all costs, using it as a resonance chamber to amplify the only voice that truly matters, his own. Intuition does not shout. The deep wisdom of your subconscious, that master algorithm that processes millions of variables per second and tells you exactly what decision to make, speaks in whispers. If your life is full of background podcasts, constant music, vibrating notifications, and trivial conversations, the whisper is drowned out. Strategic isolation is the deliberate creation of this void. It is the act of locking yourself in a room in total silence. No screens, no distractions, no book to escape into. Just you, the weight of your own existence, and a blank canvas. For the untrained mind, this is torture. Absolute solitude forces the ego to face its own lies. That is why the masses flee from silence like the plague. But for the architect, the void is the divine workshop. When you manage to sustain silence long enough, the mud of the mind settles at the bottom and the water becomes crystalline. Suddenly, the solution to the business problem that tormented you for months appears. The tactical clarity descends not as a result of thinking harder, but as a result of stopping the exterior noise. The void is magnetic power. When you isolate yourself and stop emitting signals of need to the world, you create a space of low pressure. By inhabiting the void, you become a gravitational black hole. Productive solitude versus depressive isolation. It is vital to draw a bloodline between two concepts the system tries to confuse: the productive solitude of the elite and the depressive isolation of the subject. The isolation of the 99% is reactive. They isolate themselves because the world has hurt them, or they fear rejection. They lock themselves away to consume endless entertainment. It is an escape isolation, a cowardly anesthesia to avoid facing the arena of life. This isolation rots the soul and atrophies the intellect. The productive solitude of the 1% is proactive and offensive. They do not isolate themselves to flee the world. They isolate themselves to prepare for the conquest of the world. Their isolation is not a sofa in front of a screen. It is the headquarters of a general on the eve of war. In productive solitude, the sovereign is internally hyperactive. He is reading technical manuals, structuring trusts, designing sales algorithms, or sculpting his physique. It is a tactical retreat to sharpen the axe. The architect knows that no masterpiece, economic empire, or transcendental philosophy has ever been created in a committee or at a party. Genius requires isolation. Tesla, Newton, Marcus Aurelius. They all embraced productive solitude as the crucible where they transmuted the lead of human time into the gold of legacy. When you choose productive solitude, you are telling the world, I am not available for your mediocrity, because I am busy manufacturing the greatness with which I will later rule your lives. We live in the digital age, and strategic isolation does not mean moving to a mountain cave and disconnecting the Wi-Fi. The modern sovereign understands that the internet is the greatest lever for wealth distribution in human history. The problem is not the network. The problem is how you relate to it. The masses use their screens to consume and seek validation. The architect uses the screen exclusively to produce and extract wealth, maintaining an impermeable barrier against the platform's social contagion. If you decide to monetize your knowledge or vision through platforms, you must operate under asymmetric production. This means you emit the signal, but cut the reception cable. You are the creator who uploads excellence, but you do not spend 3 hours consuming others' feeds. You launch the narrative into the market, but you do not read the comments to see if fools liked it. You are the director of the play, not the spectator criticizing actors. This type of digital isolation makes you lethal. It allows you to harvest immense financial and influence benefits from social media without paying the price of psychological rot. The traditional influencer is a slave to the algorithm. The architect uses the algorithm as an extractive tool and then returns to his internal palace. The forge of character. The character of a human being cannot be forged in public. The public is soft, demands complacency, and punishes the harshness necessary for greatness. The public wants you to be nice and apologize for shining too brightly. If you forge your character in public, you will end up a piece of modeling clay molded by strangers' hands. True character is forged on the anvil of silence. When you are completely alone facing a devastating failure, a financial bankruptcy or betrayal, it is in that isolation where true alchemical magic occurs. There is no one to play the victim in front of. There is no audience to cry to for cheap sympathy. You are alone with the disaster. In that absolute nakedness, you must decide whether to break and become dust or use the fury of defeat to harden your core. Isolation eliminates excuses. Without social noise to distract you, you are forced to assume 100% absolute responsibility for everything in your life. This assumption of responsibility hurts. It burns like the white fire of a forge. But it is the only fire capable of burning away the subject's weakness and revealing the king's steel structure. Those who flee isolation fear facing that anvil. The architect locks himself with the anvil, raises the hammer of relentless self-analysis, and strikes his weaknesses in the dark. The sniper strategy, observing without being seen. From a purely tactical and military point of view, isolation grants you the greatest competitive advantage on the board of power: information asymmetry. The exhibitionist shows all his cards. The whole world knows where he is, what he eats, and his emotional weaknesses. He is a neon-lit target on a night battlefield. The architecture of isolation turns you into a strategic sniper. From the darkness of your curated castle, you can observe the complete panorama. You can see the errors of the masses, analyze market trends without being dragged by them, and study your competitors while they are too busy shouting to realize they are being studied. You see everything, but no one sees you. You are undetectable to the system's radar. You do not announce your next moves or publish your goals. The first time the world learns what you are building in silence is the day your product dominates the market. Silence is the perfect camouflage. Tactical surprise is an exclusive privilege. The mastery of bonds, the drawbridge. The isolation of the 1% is not a blind wall without doors. It is a defensive wall equipped with a highly mechanized drawbridge. Isolating yourself from the mass does not mean isolating yourself from the entire universe. It means reclaiming the absolute right to decide who enters and who stays out. The common individual leaves the drawbridge down permanently. Any toxic relative or energy-draining friend can cross the moat and invade the throne room. His energy is plundered daily. The architect keeps the bridge raised. His default state is inaccessibility. He only lowers the bridge for two types of entities: strategic resources, partners, mentors, or iron allies who share the same frequency of excellence and bring asymmetric value to the dynasty's construction. Intimate lineage and loyalty. Those few loved ones who have proven unconditional loyalty and understand that the king's retreat is necessary to protect the kingdom. This absolute exclusivity makes access to your person a prize of incalculable value. What is abundant is despised. What is scarce is venerated. By being absent from social banality, the moment you decide to interact, your presence carries immense gravitational weight. You have turned your attention into the most expensive resource. The design of the architecture of isolation is the process of reclaiming your sovereignty. You have embraced the anvil of silence and learned to love the void. You will remain in the crowd when tactically necessary, but you will be like a ghost walking through walls. Your mind is now a fortress of black stone on an unreachable mountain. Sit on the throne of the void. Listen to the whisper of your intuition. And from the deepest and most absolute silence, begin to dictate the orders that will redraw the map of the real world. Chapter 5. The Language of the Architects, Decrees versus Complaints. To dominate the labyrinth, you must understand that the reality you inhabit is not a structure of solid and immovable matter. It is a hypersensitive energy field that responds to vibratory frequencies. Of all the tools the human being possesses to alter that field, none is as lethal, as precise, and as underestimated as the spoken word. Humanity's oldest texts, stripped of their religious dogmas, hide manuals of quantum physics and neurolinguistic programming. When ancient scriptures state that, "In the beginning was the Word," and that the universe was spoken into existence, they are not telling a fairy tale. They are revealing the source code of creation. The word is not simply an acoustic symbol to communicate. It is a physical compression wave that alters the space around it and, more importantly, instantly reprograms the wiring of your brain. 99% of people treat their words like garbage. They speak without thinking, spit out automatic phrases, repeat destructive cliches, and waste their vocal capacity on gossip and laments. They operate under the illusion that words are blown away by the wind. The 1%, the elite of the architects, knows that words are not blown away by the wind. Words crystallize the wind. For the sovereign, language is a high-precision technology. He understands that his mouth is the 3D printer of his destiny. What he articulates with emotion and conviction collapses quantum probability and turns it into a physical fact. In this chapter, we are going to amputate your old subject language and install the linguistic operating system of the owners of the world. The reporter's disease, describing versus creating. The fundamental difference between the mass and the elite lies in the direction in which they use language. The masses use language in reporter mode. Their function is to observe the reality that already exists, the densified past, and use words to describe it. They look at their bank account, see a negative balance, and declare, "I am broke." They look at their bodies, feel tiredness, and say, "I am exhausted and sick." They look at their country's economy and state, "The situation is impossible. There are no opportunities." The problem with operating as a reporter is that the subconscious is a literal machine. It has no sense of humor and does not judge whether what you say is good or bad for you. It simply obeys. When you describe a negative reality, your brain assumes you are giving it a restocking order. By saying, "I am broke," your subconscious seals that identity, shuts down the creative centers that could find financial solutions, and calibrates your reticular filter so that you only see scarcity for the rest of the day. 99% use their words to keep their prison intact. They speak of what is, and therefore what is continues to be. The 1% uses language in architect mode. The architect never uses his words to describe current reality. He uses his words to sculpt future reality. If the sovereign experiences a financial setback, he never articulates the word poverty. His account may be at zero, but he declares, "I am in a liquidity restructuring process. Massive capital is flowing into my new systems." This is not naive positive thinking. It is cognitive hacking. By pronouncing a decree of power in the face of an adverse circumstance, you generate cognitive dissonance in your brain. The brain hates the dissonance between what its master says and what its eyes see, so it immediately goes to work at maximum capacity to close that gap, forcing external reality to rise to the level of the spoken word. The complaint, the most potent spell of self-destruction. Of all the miserable uses of language, the complaint is the absolute queen. We live in a society that has turned complaining into a competitive sport. People gather in offices, coffee shops, and social media to compete over who has the hardest life, the most tyrannical boss, or the worst luck. They bond through the tie of shared suffering. You must understand the hidden anatomy of the complaint. Complaining is not venting or releasing tension, as cheap psychology has made you believe. Complaining is the act of cursing yourself. Neurochemically, every time you complain, your brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone. If you complain habitually, the neural wiring associated with negativity thickens, making you literally faster and more efficient at finding problems instead of solutions. Your prefrontal cortex atrophies, decreasing your capacity for strategic reasoning. Metaphysically, the complaint is the greatest declaration of impotence a human being can issue. When you complain about the weather, the government, or the traffic, you are telling the universe, "I am a passive victim. My environment controls me and I have no power over it." And the universe, in its infinite obedience, responds by sending you more situations to complain about to validate your victim self-image. The sovereign operates under a titanium rule, zero tolerance for complaining. If it is cold, he does not complain about the cold. He puts on a coat or lights a fire. If the market collapses, he does not cry over the injustice. He buys the assets that the complainers just sold out of panic. The elite never complains because they understand that complaining is the language of losers. The energy required to complain about a problem is the same energy required to solve it. The difference is that complaining impoverishes you, while the solution enriches you. From this instant, you must institute an absolute fast of complaints. If something displeases you, you have two exclusive royalty options. Either you use your power to change it, or you walk away in silence. There is no third option. If you catch yourself about to utter a complaint, bite your tongue until it bleeds if necessary, but do not allow that poison to leave your fortress. The Forbidden Dictionary, words that keep the masses poor. To redesign your reality, you must audit your vocabulary with the cruelty of an inquisitor. There are words and phrases that have been injected into your language by the system to guarantee your mediocrity. They seem harmless, but they are Trojan viruses that sabotage your execution. This is the Forbidden Dictionary you must amputate from your mouth today. 1. Try, attempt. I am going to try to start that business. I am going to try to wake up early. The word try contains within its very core the permission to fail. It is the escape route of cowards. When you say you are going to try something, you are telling your subconscious, I don't really think I will achieve it, but I will make the move so I don't feel guilty when I fail. The architect does not try. The architect executes or discards. As the Jedi Master of popular culture said, hiding a profound Stoic truth, do or do not, there is no try. Replace I am going to try with I am going to do it, or I have decided not to do it. 2. Hopefully, I hope. Hopefully I get that promotion. I hope everything turns out well. Hopefully, Ohala, comes from the Arabic inshallah, God willing, but in modern use it has degenerated into a wild card for passive resignation. When you use these words, you are abdicating your throne and handing over the control of your destiny to luck, chance, or a third party. The sovereign does not hope and does not sigh for hopefullys. The sovereign manifests and guarantees. Replace, hopefully it happens, with I will ensure it happens through my relentless execution. 3. I need to earn more money. I need them to approve me. The vibration of the word need is the vibration of absolute scarcity. It projects a black hole of lack. When you decree that you need something, you are confirming that you do not have it, pushing it even further away from you magnetically. Rich people do not need money, they simply operate it. The architect swaps need for preference or choice. Instead of I need that contract, you say, I have chosen to close that contract and the resources are already aligning. 4. Little by little. Here we go in the struggle. This is the typical response of the masses when you ask how they are. It is an anthem to programmed poverty. Little by little gives the universe the order to slow down your results to the maximum. In the struggle guarantees you that life will always be a bloody and exhausting war. The language of the 1% is designed for acceleration and asymmetric ease. To the question, how are you? The sovereign's internal or external response must always be a decree of expansion, advancing by leaps and bounds, scaling, or with a simple and sharp, excellent. 5. It's difficult. It's impossible. Both are opinions disguised as facts. When you say something is difficult, you are ordering your brain to release chemical friction to ensure that the task costs you blood. The system wants you to believe that being rich, healthy, and free is difficult, so that you give up and return to your cubicle. Replace it's difficult with it is a challenge that demands my level of mastery. Replace it's impossible with it requires a system I haven't designed yet. Syntactic restructuring. Speaking from the end. Eliminating forbidden words is only clearing the ground. Now we must build the new linguistic castle. The best-kept secret of reality creators is that they never speak of their desires in the future tense. 99% say, one day I will be rich, next year I will be successful. The problem with the future tense is that it always, invariably, remains in the future. Tomorrow never comes. If your decree is in the future, you are ordering reality to keep your desire always one step ahead of you. Unreachable. like a carrot tied to a stick in front of a horse. The architect masters the syntax of the fulfilled desire. He speaks and decrees exclusively in the present or past perfect tense, assuming that the invisible reality has already been sealed and the physical reality is just catching up. In the silence of his productive isolation, the void we talked about in the previous chapter, the sovereign walks through his room and decrees, "I operate companies that generate massive capital without friction. Constant present. I am grateful that this deal has already been closed and the funds already belong to me. Past perfect. At first, this will seem like madness. Your analytical mind will tell you, you are lying. The bank account is empty. But this is where you must impose your iron will over your physical senses. External reality is only the corpse of your past thoughts and words. To inject new life into it, you must speak of what is not as though it already were, until the material world has no choice but to bend and take the shape of your decree. There is a principle in basic economics. The more you print a currency, the less value it has. Inflation. The same principle applies to language. The person who speaks nonstop, who fills every awkward silence with babbling, nervous jokes or excessive explanations, has devalued their own word. Their words are 1-cent bills. No one picks them up. The leader of the elite, the sovereign of the 1%, is a master in the art of verbal greed. His words are solid gold ingots. He hands them out with calculated scarcity. This is the tactical vow of silence. Never over-explain. When the 99% say no to a commitment, they feel the pathological need to justify it with a 10-minute story so as not to offend the other person. The architect simply says no, thank you, and lets silence do the rest. The lack of explanation projects terrifying power. Death to excuses. If you make a mistake in your empire, do not use language to defend your ego. Excuses are the language of the weak. The king says, "There was a failure. I take responsibility. It is already being corrected." End of statement. Hide your work in progress. The masses announce their goals on social networks to get the cheap dopamine of applause before making the effort. Tomorrow I start my new company, and the brain receives the reward without having lifted a finger, which annihilates real motivation. The architect tells no one what he is building. His words are not wasted on boasting. They are kept as internal pressure to drive silent execution. He only speaks when the finished product is ready to devour the market. When you learn to use fewer words, the ones you choose to use acquire immense gravity. When you finally open your mouth in a boardroom, in a negotiation, or in your own private setting, people stop and listen. Because they know that if the architect has decided to spend his vocal currency, it is because what he is going to say will alter the course of reality. The magnetic resonance of the I am. We reach the peak of linguistic technology. 2 short words that contain the power to alter the DNA of your destiny. I am. In the deepest mystical and philosophical tradition, I am is the name of the creative source. From a neuropsychological point of view, everything you pronounce after I am is a direct identity command to your subconscious. It is the administrator-level access code in the computer of your mind. The subject uses the administrator code to destroy himself daily. I am a disaster with money. I am very anxious. I am bad at business. By doing so, they order their nervous system to filter their perceptions and sabotage their actions to ensure that that identity is fulfilled perfectly. It is a slow-motion suicide. The language of the architect demands that the words I am be treated as a sacred enclosure. Never, under any circumstance, not even jokingly or with sarcasm, should you place a negative or limiting attribute after this command. If you are sick, you do not say, I am a sick person. You say, my physical body is processing a temporary anomaly. You protect your core identity tooth and nail. Actively, the 1% uses I am to anchor the frequency of excellence. In front of the mirror, in the silence of his retreat, the sovereign does not repeat weak affirmations. He dictates state proclamations. I am the undisputed authority in my field. I am a magnet for capital and brilliant minds. I am the architect of this reality, and everything bends in my favor. At first, these words will clash against the wall of your old paradigms. But if you persist, if you combine the technique of the void, isolation, with the relentless repetition of this new syntax, the wall will collapse. You will stop pretending. One day you will wake up and notice that your physiology has changed. You will walk differently, and the world, which deeply respects someone who knows exactly who they are, will step aside to let you pass. The audit of the acoustic space. It is not enough to purify your own tongue. You must purify the acoustics of your environment. It is useless for you to speak the language of the architects if you allow your inner circle to fill your castle with the language of slaves. As sovereign, you are the guardian of the gates of your mind. This means you must establish a zero-tolerance policy for lack language in your presence. If you sit with a friend or partner and they start complaining bitterly about the economy, talking about the impossibility of succeeding, or defaming third parties, you have the obligation to stop that conversation immediately. You don't have to be rude, but you must be lethal. I do not allow conversations of lack in my energy field. Let's talk about solutions, strategies, or let's change the subject. Most people of the 99% will be offended. They will call you arrogant or insensitive. That's fine. Remember the previous chapter, you are immune to their opinion. By setting this limit, you will force those around you to raise their own linguistic standard if they want to stay close to you, or else you will force them to leave, automatically cleaning the trash from your yard. You are the curator of your reality. Chapter 3. Your private life must be a sanctuary of excellence, and that includes the quality of the sound waves bouncing off the walls of your room. Only words of expansion, victory, beauty, strategy, and power are allowed access. The oath of the new language. The system gave you a vocabulary designed to keep you at the base of the pyramid. They taught you to describe your chains instead of decreeing your freedom. But the labyrinth has lost its power over your mind, and as of this chapter, it also loses its power over your tongue. You are assuming the position of the architect. You understand that your voice is not an instrument to passively report how miserable the world is, but the chisel with which you relentlessly sculpt the empire you inhabit. From this moment on, your words are expensive. You do not complain because you are solely responsible. You do not try because you execute. You do not speak from the future because you demand from the present. And you reserve the atomic power of I am exclusively to invoke your absolute greatness. When a member of the elite speaks, physical reality enters a state of submission. You have left behind the dialect of prisoners. Open your mouth, sovereign. Begin to dictate the laws of your new world. The universe is listening, ready to obey. Chapter 6. The unshakable frequency, immunity to chaos. In the physical universe, heat is the result of agitation. When molecules become desperate, they collide with each other erratically, generating friction, raising the temperature, and eventually consuming energy until they turn into ashes. Cold, on the contrary, is the absence of agitation. At absolute zero, molecules stop. There is perfect order, a mathematical stillness where matter acquires superconducting properties, allowing energy to flow without resistance. This thermodynamic law governs exactly the same in the realm of human psychology and economic power. 99% of the global population lives in a state of constant emotional boiling. They are highly combustible. An alarming news story, a market drop, an office rumor, or an insult on the street is enough to ignite them. They panic, get outraged, scream, cry, and make decisions based on terror or euphoria. That emotional heat is exactly what the labyrinth needs to extract their energy. The 1%, the true owners of the game, operate at emotional absolute zero. They have developed what we call the unshakable frequency. While the world burns in collective hysteria, the architect of reality maintains an icy and calculatingly peaceful psychological temperature. It is not about being a psychopath without feelings. It is about absolute mastery over the nervous system. The sovereign feels the jolt of chaos, but flatly refuses to allow that external stimulus to dictate his internal response. Whoever controls their own emotional temperature controls the room. Whoever controls the room controls the negotiation. And whoever controls the negotiation rules the world. If the system can make you angry or scare you, the system is your master. Immunity to chaos is the ultimate declaration of independence. The absolute refusal to hand over the remote control of your mood to external reality. The panic algorithm, harvesting the hive mind. To sustain your immunity, you must first understand how chaos is manufactured. Global crises, economic collapses, and pandemics of social outrage are rarely accidents. They are mostly natural or artificial events deliberately amplified through the panic algorithm. The news industry and social media conglomerates are not in the information business. They are in the business of capturing attention through terror. The primitive human brain, the amygdala, is biologically programmed to pay more attention to a potential threat than to an opportunity. If you hear a rustle in the jungle, your brain assumes it is a predator, not a harmless bird. The corporate labyrinth exploits this ancient genetic code by sending you digital rustles 24 hours a day. When you consume the panic algorithm, your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of logical thought, long-term strategy, and creativity, shuts down almost completely. Literally, fear makes you stupid. A frightened individual is one who does not question authority, who desperately seeks a savior, who liquidates their investments at the worst time, and who consumes products to anesthetize their anxiety. Collective hysteria is the elite's harvest season. While the masses run in circles looking at screens and screaming that the sky is falling, the architect turns off the TV. The sovereign knows that if a ship is sinking, passenger panic does not seal the crack in the hull. It only makes them drown faster from exhaustion. The unshakable frequency demands that you see the machinery of terror for what it is. A spectacle of illusions designed to steal your IQ at the very moment you need it most. The law of crisis asymmetry. Chaos as a ladder. There is a sacred axiom among dynasty builders. Every crisis is simply a massive transfer of wealth and power from the impulsive to the patient. 99% see chaos as a tragedy to be avoided at all costs. The 1% sees chaos as a ladder, a restructuring of the chessboard that opens up asymmetric opportunities that would be impossible in times of peace. Imagine a collapse in the financial markets. The crowd, infected by psychic contagion, feels their survival is threatened. They sell their assets, properties, and stocks at ridiculously low prices simply to feel the momentary security of having cash under the mattress. They are burning their empires to keep warm for one night. In that exact instant, the architect, operating from his emotional ice chamber, analyzes the landscape. His pulse has not quickened. He knows humanity will survive, markets will eventually stabilize, and real assets retain intrinsic value. So, with lethal silence and an invisible smile, the sovereign opens his vault and buys for pennies what yesterday cost fortunes. Mass panic funds the elite's luxury. To master this law, you must extirpate from your mind the notion that stability is the norm. The universe is in tropic chaos. There will always be a new crisis, a new virus, a new war, a new recession. If your inner peace depends on a calm outside world, you will be an anxious slave until your dying day. You must learn to ride the wave of chaos, understanding that when the earth shakes, it is the perfect time to redesign your empire's foundations while fools hide. The shield of ataraxia, the space between stimulus and response. In ancient Greece and Rome, Stoic emperors and philosophers perfected a supreme military and spiritual concept called ataraxia, the total absence of disturbance, the imperturbability of the soul. It is not apathy or laziness. It is the perfect tension of a bowstring that does not tremble before releasing the arrow. Ataraxia is built by mastering a microscopic but infinite territory, the space that exists between an external stimulus and your internal response. When the common individual receives a negative stimulus, a client canceling $1 million contract, a relative attacking verbally, an unexpected legal setback, the response is immediate. Stimulus, reaction. There is no filter. They are emotional vending machines. You press the fear button and they give you panic. You press the anger button and they give you fury. The architect inserts a titanium barrier in that space. When the negative stimulus hits, the sovereign pauses. He breathes. In that microsecond, the magic of the unshakable frequency occurs. He asks himself 3 questions from the coldness of his intellect. Do I have absolute control over this event? If the answer is no, the worry is instantly discarded. Is this crisis an imminent lethal threat, or simply an inconvenience glorified by my ego? What is the strategic move that grants me the greatest advantage in this new scenario? By inserting logical analysis between stimulus and response, the event loses its radioactive charge. The tragedy becomes a simple algorithmic data point. You become a sniper watching the enemy's bullet hit centimeters from his face on armored glass. You note the impact, calculate the origin trajectory, but you do not blink. That pause is where your freedom and absolute power reside. The depersonalization of failure, the king and the board. One of the reasons the masses go into hysteria in the face of chaos is because they take reality as a personal attack. If their business goes bankrupt, they feel they are a failure. If the market punishes them, they feel life hates them. Their identity is fused with their external results, making them emotionally fragile like glass. The architect practices radical depersonalization. The sovereign understands that he is not the chessboard, nor is he the pieces. He is the mind that moves the pieces. If you lose a knight or a rook in a game, you don't cry over the wooden piece. You evaluate the loss and adjust the strategy to protect the king and seek checkmate. When a project collapses or a crisis destroys an income source, the 1% is not offended. The universe is not conspiring against you. It is simply executing impersonal physical, economic, and mathematical laws. Chaos has no first or last name. It does not seek to hurt you. It simply is. By decoupling your ego from the event, you reach invulnerability. If millions of dollars are taken from you, the unshakable frequency lets you say, "The market has reabsorbed the capital. The extraction system failed. I will identify the structural crack, redesign the funnel, and extract the capital again with interest." There are no tears, no sleepless nights, no victim speeches. There is only iteration, adjustment, and relentless execution. The warrior who does not fear losing his sword is the most dangerous on the battlefield, because his power resides in his arm, not the metal. The unshakable frequency is not just a philosophical stance. It requires rigorous somatic and biological control. Your mind and body are connected in a two-way feedback loop. You cannot keep the mind of an emperor if your body breathes like a terrified prisoner. When chaos erupts, the respiratory rhythm of the masses becomes short, shallow, and clavicular in the upper chest. This breathing confirms to the reptilian brain that death is approaching, blocking access to logic. The architect must master the physiology of calm. In the midst of the most brutal crisis, when everyone else is running for the emergency exits, the sovereign anchors his feet to the ground and deliberately changes his breathing pattern. He inhales deeply from the diaphragm, expanding the abdomen, holding the oxygen, and exhaling with glacial slowness. This technique, used by special forces operators and elite hostage negotiators, stimulates the vagus nerve and triggers the parasympathetic system. It lowers heart rate, reduces blood pressure, and most critically, floods the frontal lobe with oxygenated blood. You physically become the eye of the hurricane. On the periphery of the storm, the winds destroy entire cities. But in the geometric center of the cyclone, there is an absolute void, a clear sky, a terrifying silence. While chaos swirls around you and your competitors devour each other from stress, you operate from that center. From that biological state, your decisions will be of such acute lucidity that your opponents will think you possess supernatural powers. It is not magic, it is the tactical superiority of a mastered nervous system. It is useless to build an ice shield if you let people engulfed in flames embrace you every day. The unshakable frequency requires a necessary cruelty in managing your social environment. You must identify and neutralize the panic transmitters. These are the people in your life or organization who thrive on drama. They are the ones who send you alarmist messages at 6 in the morning, forward global catastrophe theories, and transform every minor corporate setback into an apocalypse. They use panic to feel important, since in times of peace, their mediocrity becomes evident. The sovereign applies a non-negotiable social quarantine to these profiles. You do not try to calm them, debate them, or prove them wrong using logic. Fear is deaf to logic. You simply cut off their access to your acoustic and mental space. If an employee or partner exhibits the panic transmitter pattern during a business crisis, their influence must be silenced immediately. A single terrified individual can infect an entire battalion and cause the troops to flee before the enemy fires the first arrow. The 1% inner circle is exclusively composed of men and women who, when the sky darkens and foundations shake, look each other in the eye, offer an icy smile and say, "The board has been cleared. It is our turn to move." If those around you lack this steel thermostat, you are sleeping surrounded by gunpowder. Magnetization by contrast. The leader by gravity. There is a hidden law in human group dynamics. In times of extreme crisis, traditional hierarchies based on titles, money, or corporate positions completely disintegrate. When panic strikes, the herd does not follow the man in the most expensive suit or the one with the director title on his door. The herd, by pure biological survival instinct, automatically and unconditionally submits to the person projecting the most calm in the room. This is magnetization by contrast. Your unshakable frequency becomes a weapon of social conquest. When a tragedy, corporate collapse, or market disruption occurs, the anxiety of those present creates a leadership void. Everyone will desperately seek an adult in the room, a beacon that does not move. If you are the individual who maintains silence, breathes slowly, evaluates damages without altering your tone of voice, and issues the first directive with the coldness of an artificial intelligence, the power of the room will transfer to you in a matter of seconds. Those who previously challenged you will seek you out asking for orders. Your calm will act as a sedative for collective hysteria and as a gravitational magnet for authority. Power is not demanded by shouting louder than everyone else. At the top, power is claimed by whispering while others shout. It is the lethal piece of the sovereign that bends the will of the masses. Your immunity to chaos is the ultimate credential that certifies your right to reign. To keep a cold temperature in the face of crisis, the architect does not rely on improvisation. He relies on dark mental rehearsal. This is the Stoic technique of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. 99% live in denial. They believe positive thinking means ignoring that things can go wrong. They close their eyes and cross their fingers. So when disaster inevitably strikes, it finds them caught off guard, naked, and mentally unarmed, triggering their emotional collapse. The 1%, the sovereign, sits in the void of his productive solitude and deliberately visualizes with clinical detail the absolute collapse of everything he has built. What exactly will I do if the real estate market collapses tomorrow and I lose 80% of my liquidity? What are my first 3 moves if my closest business partner robs and sues me? How will I operate if my main distribution platform blocks me forever? The architect walks through hell in his mind dozens of times while safe in his palace. He writes contingency protocols. He establishes redundancy plans. He emotionally accepts the loss before it happens. Having lived through tragedy and bankruptcy 1,000 times in the theater of his mind, when physical chaos finally erupts in the real world, the sovereign does not experience shock or surprise. There is no panic, because the event is known territory. There is only a sense of tactical déjà vu. You open the protocol manual you wrote with a cool head and execute the countermeasures while your paralyzed rivals try to understand what just happened. Paranoid preparation in the shadows guarantees unshakable peace under the spotlight. We reach the metaphysical peak of this chapter. To achieve the true unshakable frequency, the ultimate immunity against chaos, you must resolve the atomic core of human fear. Why do people panic? Because they are terrified of losing. Fear of losing their money, status, reputation, comfort, or the people they believe they possess. Chaos is terrifying only to those who cling tightly to the illusion of absolute control over volatile matter. The architect achieves his icy imperturbability through a counterintuitive act of liberation. He accepts that he has already lost everything. It is the samurai's philosophy before battle. The warrior who considers himself already dead has no fear of dying. Therefore, he fights with an ease, an audacity, and a ferocity that makes him practically invincible against opponents who are scared for their lives. The sovereign looks at his empire, bank accounts, and prestige, and internally acknowledges, none of this is truly mine. They are just tools of a temporary game. I entered this board naked, and I will leave it naked. All the material things I own can burn to the ground tonight, and my core, the source of my genius, my consciousness, will remain intact. When unhealthy attachment dies, true power is born. Immunity to chaos does not come from having stone walls so thick that nothing can penetrate them. It comes from the deep understanding that even if the walls fall, you are still the king of the ruins. The unshakable frequency is the highest state of sovereignty. It is walking through the crossfire of the economy, social drama, and systemic collapse, with the slow, calculated, and elegant step of an apex predator who knows the storm does not come to destroy him, but to clear the forest of his weak competitors. While the 99% beg on their knees for peace and stability, the 1% looks up at the darkening storm on the horizon, takes a deep breath of the cold air of tragedy, and utters an inaudible decree. Let chaos come. I am ready to build. Chapter 7, The Iron Circle, The Purge of Your Environment. In cellular biology, osmosis is the physical process by which a solvent passes through a semi-permeable membrane from an area of low solute concentration to an area of high concentration, until both sides reach equilibrium. Nature hates imbalances and will always seek to equalize charges. This scientific principle is not limited to water and salt. It governs human behavior, ambition, and bank accounts with mathematical and terrifying precision. Your brain is a porous membrane. Your subconscious mind is constantly absorbing the frequency, vocabulary, limitations, and fears of the people around you. It is an invisible, silent, and unstoppable process. 99% of humanity ignores this law. They believe, from the arrogance of ignorance, that they can maintain an emperor's mentality while sitting at the table with slaves. They believe their willpower will be enough to resist the mediocrity of their environment. This is a mathematically lost battle. If you introduce a drop of pure water into a mud pond, the pond is not purified. The drop of water disappears, absorbed by the dirt. The 1%, the architect of reality, understands that willpower is a finite resource that is depleted at the end of the day. Therefore, they do not rely on their ability to resist negativity. They simply eliminate negativity from their ecosystem. They understand that their network is their manifest destiny. If you surround yourself with 5 people who complain about the economy, you will be the 6th. If you surround yourself with 5 people who justify their obesity or laziness, you will be the 6th. But if you manage to infiltrate a circle of 5 masterminds who operate multi-million-dollar businesses and master their physiology, it is statistically impossible that you will not become the 6th. The Iron Circle is not a group of friends to hang out with. It is an ecosystem reverse-engineered to force your own evolution. It is the use of the law of osmosis in your favor. Instead of spending energy resisting the gravity of mediocrity, you use the gravity of others' excellence to be elevated effortlessly. The inertia of nostalgia, the trap of toxic loyalty. The biggest obstacle to building an iron circle is not finding successful people, but letting go of unsuccessful people. The labyrinth has encoded in your mind a profoundly destructive concept: unconditional loyalty based on the past. The subject maintains relationships by simple geographic accident. They stay due to the inertia of nostalgia. He's my friend from high school. We grew up in the same neighborhood. He's my cousin. They cling to people who do not share their values, who have no ambition, and who vibrate on a frequency of lack, simply because they share memories of a time when both were equally ignorant and vulnerable. The architect must make a painful but vital incision. Sharing a past does not grant the automatic right to inhabit your future. Loyalty to a person who refuses to grow is not a virtue, it is a suicide pact. If you are trying to build an empire, reading asymmetric strategies and reprogramming your vocabulary, you must detach. If you return on a Friday night to a group of friends who only talk about celebrity lives, get drunk to forget their week, and subtly mock your new goals, you are committing treason against your own potential. The system will call you cold. They will tell you that money has changed you, or that you have forgotten your roots. That is the voice of the herd, terrified of the sheep that is turning into a wolf. Your roots are not the mud you come from. Your true roots are the greatness you are destined to achieve. The sovereign looks at nostalgia with the same contempt with which a general looks at a map of a war that has already ended. The past is a library of lessons, not a permanent residence. If your childhood friends are not building their own dynasty, their place in your life has expired. The vampire of ambition, false empathy. The threat in your environment rarely presents itself with fangs and a cape. The destroyers of your empire are not your declared enemies. Your enemies are easy to identify and neutralize. The real danger comes from people who love you from their own scarcity. They are the vampires of ambition. They operate under the guise of concern and false empathy. When you announce that you are going to launch a company, invest in a risky asset, or isolate yourself to study for a year, the vampire does not attack you directly. He tells you, with a soft voice and a worried look, "But what if it goes wrong? I just want to protect you. Don't work so hard, you have to enjoy life, you'll get sick. Remember that rich people aren't happy, better stay safe in your job." Each of these phrases is a poisoned dart with anesthesia. They are not protecting you, they are protecting their own ego. If you succeed spectacularly, starting from the same place as them, you become a relentless mirror reflecting their cowardice and laziness. Your victory is the physical proof that their excuses were lies. Therefore, for them to continue sleeping peacefully in their mediocrity, they need you to fail too, or never try. The 1% detects this false empathy from miles away. The sovereign understands that the advice of those who have built nothing is worth less than the air they use to pronounce it. When someone asks you to be realistic, they are asking you to reduce the majesty of your vision to fit in the coffin of their mental reality. The purge of your environment demands that you identify these vampires, even if they are your parents, siblings, or partner. You don't have to hate them. Hate requires too much energy. You simply must revoke their access pass to your war room. Never again discuss your plans, finances, or visions with them. You love them from a distance, but you close the door to the vault of your heart. The surgical purge, the extraction protocol. Building an iron circle requires that you first empty the room. You must learn the art of the surgical purge. The 99% fears social confrontation and prefers to endure toxic relationships for decades rather than have an uncomfortable conversation. The architect, having mastered the cold spirit, executes the cut without hesitation. Not all purges require cinematic drama or a shouting match. In fact, the elite rarely fight. They simply disappear strategically. There are 3 levels of extraction in the purge of your environment. 1. The spectral fade out. For acquaintances and superficial friends who do not add value, there are no announcements or explanations. You simply stop being available. You raise your isolation wall. You take days to answer a trivial message and respond with icy, polite monosyllables. You are never available for their purposeless meetings. In a matter of weeks, receiving no energy, the vampire will seek another victim. The bond starves to death. 2. The glass border. For close family members or co-workers you cannot physically eliminate from your life without causing a structural collapse. With them, you raise a glass border. You are cordial, polite, and professional, but intimacy is zero. You listen to their complaints with a stone smile. You offer no advice, do not tell of your victories, and skillfully evade any topic involving your growth. You become a slippery surface where their negativity finds nowhere to hold on. You are a present ghost. 3. Direct amputation. For toxic partners, sabotaging significant others, or supposed friends who betray or disrespect you openly. Here there is no fading. There is a guillotine. The sovereign looks into the eyes, articulates the sentence with the language of the architects, and closes the book. Our paths and visions are no longer aligned. Do not contact me anymore. I wish you well. Absolute silence and definitive blocking on all access channels. The architect prefers to be completely alone in the dark rather than allow a parasite to walk through his palace. The principle of relational investment, the human ROI. The system has taught you that evaluating relationships in terms of utility makes you a bad person. They tell you that love and friendship must be unconditional. Another lie from the labyrinth to keep you chained to losers. Love for your offspring can be unconditional, but respect and access are strictly conditional. The 1% chooses its circle with the same rigor, mathematical calculation, and due diligence with which it chooses to invest $1 million in a company. Every relationship in your life is a transaction of energy, time, and mental capital. Therefore, each must be evaluated based on its ROI, return on interaction. After interacting with a person, the sovereign does an immediate somatic audit. Do I feel lighter, sharper, and more inspired after this coffee? Positive ROI. Do I feel exhausted, doubtful of myself, or with a headache after hearing their laments? Negative ROI. Treat relationships like financial assets. If a financial asset gave you losses for 10 consecutive years, you would sell it today without mercy. Why do you keep friendships that have left you in a spiritual and mental deficit for a decade? To enter an architect's iron circle, a candidate must bring clear, measurable, and asymmetric value. That value is not always money. It can be challenging intellectual brilliance, bulletproof loyalty in times of crisis, an ability to see strategic angles you miss, or simply a frequency of excellence and peace that raises the standard of the entire group. If the person brings no capital, they are a liability. The corridor of the void, surviving the transition. There is a predictable and terrifying phenomenon that occurs immediately after purging your environment. The corridor of the void. You have cut ties with your old 99% circle. You no longer go to bars, participate in office gossip, or argue on social media. But the 1% iron circle has not yet materialized in your life. You are in no man's land. This is the winter of the soul for the entrepreneur and the leader. It is deep, cold, and silent isolation. In this corridor, 90% of those who try to escape the system break. Solitude becomes unbearable. Their brain, addicted to the cheap validation of their old mediocre friends, begs them to return. They rationalize, maybe I was too hard. No one is perfect. At least I laughed with them. And so, they return to the mud. The one who possesses the Solomon Code understands that the corridor of the void is not a punishment. It is a rite of passage and a security filter. The universe will not send you elite members if you smell like submission. Kings do not sit at the table with men who beg for company. You must learn to love the corridor of the void. Use that period of absolute solitude to devour books, sharpen your technical skills, build your economic empire, and harden your mind. You have to become so massive and brilliant on your own that you generate your own gravity. When you no longer need anyone to validate you, you will be ready to recruit the best. Once you have purged the fools and crossed the corridor of the void, you must build the new circle. The mistake novices make is operating from need. They see someone in the 1% and approach them like beggars. Please teach me. The elite repel beggars. They know that a man who only seeks to extract value is a vampire on another level. Architects have no time for blind altruism with strangers. Recruitment for your iron circle operates under the law of attraction by proof of value. To get a king's attention, you don't ask for coins. You bring him his enemy's head or build him an aqueduct. To infiltrate power circles, you must become undeniably useful and interesting. The currency of execution. If a superior gives you an instruction, don't just say thank you. Disappear, apply it violently, generate a massive result, and return 6 months later to report it. When they see someone who executes, they instantly identify him as one of their own and open the door. The asymmetric contribution. Discover what problem the person you want in your circle has and solve it for free before they ask, so masterfully they must notice your existence. You don't ask for a seat, you build the table. High-frequency signals. The elite recognize each other by minimal details. The silent luxury of your dress, the sparsity of your words, the unshakable posture before a crisis. When you behave like the 1% before having the 1% money and people approach by pure frequency resonance. Anatomy of the Iron Circle, the Empire's Board of Directors. An iron circle is not a homogeneous group of friends giving each other pats on the back. It is a relentless board of directors. A circle of lethal power, curated under Solomon's principles, must contain 3 specific profiles. If you lack any, your structure is vulnerable. 1. The mentors, the front horizon, the key. These are people who are 10 or 20 years ahead of you. Their function is not to be your friends, but to be brutal with you. They tear apart your business plan illusions by pointing out the structural flaw. A true mentor saves you decades of suffering. Before them, you keep your ego at 0, your mouth shut, and your notebook open. 2. The equals, the wolves of the pack. These are people at your exact level of hunger and tactical aggressiveness. They are your trench mates. The function of equals is evolutionary competition. If they close a huge deal, it ignites your internal fire to close a bigger one. There is no envy, only calibration of standards. 3. The successors, the back horizon. These are people who are where you were 5 years ago. They have the hunger, but lack the map. Your obligation is to select young, brilliant minds and train them. Teaching is the highest form of mastering your own knowledge. Furthermore, you create armies of absolute loyalty, dynastic legacy. The board test, continuous audit, and pruning of loyalties. The system deceives you into believing that once you find a good group, the work is done. False. The iron circle is a living organism that requires continuous pruning. As your empire scales, problems become more complex. A person who was an excellent equal when you were earning $50,000 a year may suffer from vertigo at $5 million. Some members will get scared of your evolution, ask you to slow down, or develop secret envy. The architect performs the board test every year. He audits each member. Is this person still expanding my vision, or have they become a camouflaged anchor? Loyalties have an expiration date if not backed by parallel growth. If an ally stagnates and refuses to grow, the sovereign throws them a rope. If they refuse to climb, the architect cuts the rope. Keeping an atrophied member at the top of your empire is an invitation to structural collapse. The elite forgives lack of experience, but punishes lack of hunger with immediate expulsion. The final destination of the purge and construction of the iron circle is the creation of the shield wall, the phalanx. When you have eliminated the vampires, crossed the void, and recruited minds of proven excellence, you cease to be an isolated individual. Your circle becomes a single organism of power operating under swarm intelligence. If you need access to an inaccessible contact, your circle only needs one call. If you face a market collapse you don't understand, an equal transfers the solution in 10 minutes. Knowledge, resources, lawyers, capital, and psychological protection flow through your iron circle without friction, at the speed of light. The 99% see the top of the world as a lonely place because they try to climb it surrounded by ballast or alone in their arrogance. The 1% knows the top is a private feast for those with the brutality and wisdom to expel the weak and ally their blood with the strong. Your time of pleasing the mediocre is over. Raise the guillotine. Cut the ties that bind you to the mud. Endure the cold of the temporal void. And build a table where only kings willing to conquer reality by your side have the right to sit. The empire is not built with friends given by chance. It is conquered with brothers in arms you choose in the fire. Chapter 8, Asymmetric Execution, the End of Paralysis. If you could walk through the graveyard of empires that were never born, you would not find tombstones marked by a lack of intelligence, lack of talent, or scarcity of resources. You would find an infinite ocean of tombstones engraved with a single inscription: I was waiting for the perfect moment. The world is full of anonymous geniuses. Men and women with dazzling IQs and revolutionary business plans die in poverty and anonymity. They watch from the stands as individuals with half their intelligence and a fraction of their talent conquer markets, accumulate dynastic fortunes, and redesign the world. 99% look at this disparity and attribute it to luck. The architect knows that luck is a myth invented by the mediocre to justify their inaction. The true difference between the broke genius and the triumphant sovereign boils down to a single thermodynamic law of success. The universe does not reward the complexity of your thoughts. It rewards the brutality of your execution. The masses operate under a paradigm of illusory symmetry. They believe that to obtain a large result, they need a perfectly symmetrical plan, unlimited resources, zero risk, and the approval of all green lights before stepping on the accelerator. They spend years in the planning phase, drawing maps of territories they have never set foot in. The 1% masters asymmetric execution. They understand that a minuscule, fast, imperfect, and violent action launched into the real world produces a data return 1,000 times greater than a year of simulations in the head. The sovereign does not wait for the bridge to be built to cross the abyss. He jumps into the void and builds the bridge while falling. Asymmetric execution is the art of moving with such speed and ferocity that fear has no time to catch you, and the competition doesn't even understand where the blow came from. To unlock lethal execution, we must first destroy the system's most elegant lie, perfectionism. In job interviews, the sheep of the labyrinth say, "I am too much of a perfectionist." They believe they are projecting a high standard of excellence, an unshakable commitment to quality. They lie to themselves. In the architecture of power, perfectionism is not a standard of excellence. It is a defense mechanism of the ego, driven by the absolute terror of failure and criticism. The perfectionist delays the launch to avoid judgment. He delays it because he is terrified that if he launches his work and the world rejects it, his greatest fear will be confirmed, that he is not enough. Perfectionism is a heavy and suffocating armor you wear to ensure no one can judge you, because you never deliver anything to be judged. Excellence and perfectionism are antonyms. Excellence requires iteration. It demands that you deliver imperfect work to the market, take the blows of criticism, bleed, analyze the failure, correct the error, and launch a superior version the next day. Perfectionism requires you to stay in your room, polishing a wooden sword for 10 years, while outside, the war is fought and won with rusty swords. The sovereign murders his perfectionism. He prefers the shame of a defective first attempt to the silent agony of what if. If the first version of your project, company, or strategy does not give you a little shame when you look back a year later, it means you waited too long to launch it. Imperfection in motion is infinitely more lethal than static perfection. The 70% rule, the fog of war. In Special Forces military doctrine and the philosophy of Karl von Clausewitz, there is a fundamental concept known as the fog of war. On the battlefield, you will never have 100% of the information. You will never know exactly where all enemy troops are or if your radios will work perfectly. If a general decides to wait in his trench until he has absolute certainty about every variable before giving the order to attack, the fog will never lift and the enemy will surround and massacre him in inaction. Business, investments, and personal conquest are modern war. The labyrinth has programmed you to demand guarantees. The masses say, "I will start when I have all the capital. I will invest when the market is predictable." They are demanding that the fog of war magically disappear. The 1% operates under the 70% rule. If you have 70% of the required information, 70% of the basic resources, and 70% certainty about your intuition, you execute immediately. If you wait to have 90% or 100% of the information, you arrive too late. The window of opportunity has already closed, the market has changed, and your competitors, who attacked with 70%, have already cornered the territory. Making decisions with incomplete information is the definition of sovereign leadership. The remaining 30% of the missing information will not be found in books, risk analyses, or consultants' opinions. That 30% is only revealed in the crossfire of combat. The real market is the only judge and the only teacher. The architect launches the offensive, receives the missing information through impact, adjusts the bullet's trajectory mid-flight, and hits the target. Speed is a defensive moat. The corporate system values size and bureaucracy. The architect values absolute speed. In the modern economy, the big fish no longer eats the small fish. The fast fish eats the slow fish. Speed is an impregnable defensive moat. When you are fast, you drastically reduce the cost of making a mistake. If the subject spends 2 years planning a business that fails in the first month of launch, he has lost 2 years of vital life. The pain of failure will paralyze him forever. If the architect has an idea on Monday, builds a crude prototype on Tuesday, launches it on Wednesday, and on Friday discovers it is a failure, he has only lost 5 days. He dusts himself off over the weekend, and next Monday is launching a new idea with the data gathered from his mistake. Asymmetric execution relies on the speed of failure. The goal is not to not fail. The goal is to fail so fast, so cheaply, and so efficiently that failure becomes a data acquisition cost. When you move at inhuman speeds, you generate a reality distortion field around you. Your competitors are forced to be reactive. While they are convening a meeting to discuss how to respond to your move, you have already executed 3 more moves. You suffocate them with your rhythm. This speed does not require a Herculean effort that exhausts you. Remember, the sovereign never sacrifices his peace. It requires the elimination of internal friction. Friction is doubt, asking permission, consulting 5 people before sending an email, redesigning a logo no one cares about. By eliminating friction from your mental process, your execution becomes instantaneous. You think the order, and your body executes it in the same millisecond. That is the speed of the gods. The OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. To systematize speed and annihilate paralysis, the architect integrates into his neurology a tactical algorithm developed by Colonel John Boyd, a legendary fighter pilot, the OODA loop. This loop explains how to win in situations of chaos, uncertainty, and fierce competition. It consists of 4 phases repeated indefinitely. Observe. Gather raw data from your environment. What is the market doing? Where is the money moving? What lack exists that I can fill? Orient. Filter that information through your experience, mental models, and iron circle. Make sense of the data without letting emotions or ideology blind you. Decide. Formulate the action hypothesis. Establish the tactical plan with 70% of the information. Act. Execute the decision violently and definitively in the real world. The key to the OODA loop is not simply executing the 4 steps, but doing so faster than your opponent or the system itself. If you can complete 3 OODA loops in the time it takes your competition to complete 1, you have gotten inside their decision cycle. By the time they decide how to react to your first attack, reality has already changed because you executed your second and third maneuvers. You paralyze them, causing cognitive overload. 99% of people get stuck between observation and orientation. They observe the problem, analyze it, read about it, discuss it in meetings, and observe again. They suffer from chronic constipation of action. The sovereign understands that the act phase is the only one that alters the material plane. Most importantly, action generates new information that immediately feeds back into the observe phase, restarting the loop with a higher level of tactical intelligence. You don't learn chess reading books. You learn by losing hundreds of games against superior players under a strict time limit. The OODA loop makes you a quantum processor of real experience. The bloody prototype, the launch to learn philosophy. The masses have a romantic concept of creation. They think of the author who locks himself in a cabin for 5 years to write the perfect novel, or the inventor who spends a decade in his garage. That romanticism is a sure ticket to irrelevance in the era of asymmetry. The 1% operates under the bloody prototype or minimum viable product, MVP philosophy. This applies to every facet of the architect's life. A bloody prototype is the ugliest, crudest, cheapest, and fastest version of your idea that is still capable of delivering the core promise to the market. If you want to write a book, don't lock yourself away to write 500 pages. Write 3 powerful articles on the topic. Launch them, your bloody prototype, and see how the market responds. If no one reads them, the idea was dead and you saved 5 years. If they go viral, you just validated the novel. If you want to start a service business, don't rent an office or spend weeks designing business cards. Call 10 potential clients today, offer the service, close the sale by charging an advance, and then figure out how to deliver the result. The bloody prototype is the antithesis of analysis paralysis. It gets you out of your head and throws you into the arena. Yes, you will bleed. Yes, there will be flaws in the first delivery. Yes, you will have to apologize, make quick adjustments, and miss a night's sleep to deliver. But in that chaotic process, you will have learned 1,000 times more about the true customer need than your paralyzed competitor in his boardroom. The ego hates the bloody prototype because it makes it look vulnerable. The architect submits his ego to the guillotine. He knows today's vulnerability is tomorrow's diamond armor. The market pays for efficient problem solving, not impeccable logo design. Launch, let the world hit the prototype to find weak points and reinforce it in version 2.0. That is the metabolism of empires. Education is camouflage procrastination. The labyrinth programmed you to believe traditional education and infinite information gathering are synonymous with progress. Since childhood, we are conditioned to believe reading, studying, and accumulating degrees is the route to greatness. This is a dangerous trap, dressing inaction in the cloak of intellectual virtue. 99% use information consumption as camouflage procrastination. When they feel the urge to start a business or master a new skill, the terror of action invades them. To appease the guilt, instead of executing, they buy 3 books, enroll in a course, and spend a month watching tutorials. Their brain releases dopamine feeling they are doing something, when in physical reality, their bank account and status remain exactly the same. They are consuming the illusion of progress. In the 1% economy, education is irrelevant if not immediately married to just-in-time execution. The architect does not study a topic for 6 months, just in case. The sovereign identifies a critical problem preventing him from scaling his empire today. He seeks the exact knowledge, tactical manual, mentor's advice, or book chapter that solves that specific problem. He consumes it in 2 hours, and in the 3rd hour, he executes it in the real world. Information is not power. Information is potential. Execution is power. If you read a financial strategy book and do not move a single dollar or change your trust structure in the next 48 hours, you are consuming entertainment to feel intellectually superior. The sovereign applies the informational restriction diet. For every hour of consumption, the architect forces himself to execute 3 hours of asymmetric action. If you cannot execute the information, stop consuming it. The lethal cost of inaction, the invisible tax. Analysis paralysis is sustained by a flawed risk calculation. The masses exhaustively analyze the risk of acting. If I start a business, I might lose my savings. If I speak, I might make a fool of myself. Their minds are 100% focused on the cost of action. What their calculation omits is the invisible tax of the cost of inaction. The universe does not forgive stillness. If you are not moving up, the gravity of entropy is dragging you down. There is no neutral state. The cost of not launching that business today is not simply staying where you are. The cost of inaction includes the $1 million you fail to earn in the next 5 years because you yielded market share. It includes the deterioration of your self-confidence every time you look in the mirror and know you are a coward facing your ambition. It includes the systemic risk of depending on a linear salary while inflation and algorithms automate your profession. The sovereign makes the correct calculation. Is it dangerous to jump into the abyss? Yes. But staying on this burning bridge is guaranteed death. The risk of acting is a possibility of failure. The risk of inaction is the certainty of decay. When you internalize the crushing cost of doing nothing, paralysis disappears. You realize playing defensively in the labyrinth is the riskiest strategy of all. The 1% plays perpetual offense because they understand that, in a constantly mutating world, calculated aggressiveness is the safest haven asset. Inertia and the physics of momentum, the icebreaker. In classical physics, the law of inertia states a body at rest tends to stay at rest, and a body in motion tends to stay in motion. Static friction is the initial resistance you must overcome to move a heavy object. Once moving, kinetic friction comes into play, which is significantly lower. This means the most titanic, painful, and exhausting effort of all asymmetric execution is concentrated in the first movement. Writing the first line of code, making the first cold call, or legally registering the company. The brain, seeking to conserve energy, will throw 1,000 excuses at you to avoid breaking static inertia. The architect understands this law and uses the brute force of the icebreaker. He does not seek to be motivated to start, because motivation is a cheap emotion for novices. He operates through obligatory micro-execution. If facing a massive task that paralyzes you, the sovereign does not visualize the mountaintop. He reduces execution to the most absurdly small and ridiculous step possible. I'm not going to write a book today. I'm going to open a blank document and write 1 sentence. If I want to stop after that, I stop. I'm not going to launch a global corporation today. I'm going to buy the internet domain in the next 5 minutes. The trick of obligatory micro-execution is tricking your reptilian brain. By reducing the task's threat, you overcome static friction. Once you open the document, the body goes into motion. Inertia changes sides. It is easier to keep executing than to stop. You have created momentum. Momentum is the most destructive and creative force in the business universe. When a 1,000-ton locomotive is stopped, a small wooden block on its wheels can prevent it from moving. But when that same locomotive travels at 200 kilometers per hour, it can crash through a 2-meter-thick steel wall without slowing down. The masses never generate momentum because they stop to plan after every small step. The architect executes a micro-action, allows momentum to take control, and becomes an unstoppable force of nature. Problems and competition walls, which previously seemed invincible, disintegrate under the weight of incessant execution. Asymmetric execution requires a profound transformation in identity. You must stop seeing yourself as a philosophical thinker, an eternal student, or a dreamer waiting his turn. You must assume the psyche of the tactical executioner. The executioner does not debate the sentence's morality in front of the execution block. The executioner does not freeze wondering if the axe is sharp enough or the light angle perfect. When he receives the order from his superior intellect, he raises the steel and drops it. Doubt is annihilated in the very act of cutting. 99% fall in love with their doubts, using them as protective amulets against the brutal world. For the 1%, doubting is an unacceptable luxury once the OUDA loop reaches the decision phase. You have gathered 70% of the information. You isolated your mind from social noise. You decreed your success with the language of the architects. The only thing left between you and the empire is the physical space of action. The architect's oath to asymmetric execution is inflexible. I will never allow intelligence to degenerate into cowardice. Paralysis is not prudence. It is the slave's fear dressed in intellectual clothing. Perfectionism died today. Waiting for the perfect moment is heresy in the king's court. Step out of the shadows of infinite planning. Launch your bloody prototype into the jaws of the market. Accept rapid failure, laugh at the aesthetic errors of your first iteration, and run at a speed that burns the oxygen around you. While the labyrinth debates theory, you own the facts. The throne belongs, by cosmic right, to the one with the courage to take it by storm. Execute, now. Chapter 9, Silent Wealth, Money Talks, Wealth Whispers. To understand the abyss separating 99% of humanity from the elite architects, we must observe nature. In the animal kingdom, the peacock displays a gigantic, heavy, and brightly colored fan of feathers. This display has no practical utility for survival. In fact, it makes him slower, heavier, and an extremely easy target for predators. Why does he do it then? Because it is a biological signal of status. He shouts to his environment, "I have so much energy and resources that I can afford to carry this useless weight and stay alive." The modern social labyrinth has replicated this primitive biology with terrifying precision. It has transformed human beings into financial peacocks. The system designed a status tournament where the masses desperately compete to show their neon feathers. Sports cars bought on credit, logo-saturated clothing, and oversized watches. The subject believes participating in this tournament makes him superior. He believes that by exhibiting the money he spends, he is demonstrating power. This is the system's most lethal trap. The system knows the human drive to seek social validation is stronger than the instinct for financial self-preservation. They have convinced you that greatness is measured by what the world can see. The 1%, the sovereign who has decoded the matrix, observes the peacock display and sees exactly what it is: a public declaration of deep insecurity and imminent vulnerability. The architect refuses to participate in the slave's tournament. He understands that when you need to shout to the world that you have value, you are confirming that in the silence of your own mind, you doubt your own existence. Silent wealth is the absolute refusal to play a game where the prize is the applause of fools and the cost is the loss of your freedom. The paradox of ostentation, money versus wealth. There is an epidemic financial myopia that confuses two radically opposed concepts: money and wealth. Money is the visible flow. It is the monthly income, the salary, the bank transfer. Money makes noise. You can see money when someone buys a $5,000 suit or a luxury vehicle. When people say, "I want to be rich," what they are really saying is, "I want to spend a lot of money." That mentality guarantees long-term poverty. Wealth, on the contrary, is what is not seen. It is the hidden reservoir. Wealth is the financial assets that have not been spent, the investment properties that generate rent invisibly, the index funds accumulating compound interest in the shadows. Wealth whispers. You cannot walk down the street and see an architect's investment portfolio. Here lies the paradox of ostentation, a brutal mathematical equation the masses refuse to accept. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest and most exact way to have less money. When the labyrinth dweller earns $100,000 and buys a car for that amount to look successful, the universe takes note. He just destroyed $100,000 of potential wealth to buy a liability that devalues upon leaving the dealership. His bank account is back to zero, but now he has the approval of his neighbors. He traded his empire for a flash of attention. The sovereign operates under the principle of asymmetric retention. If the architect generates $1 million, his exterior lifestyle barely alters. He drives a safe, discreet vehicle and lives in an excellent but non-ostentatious home. Why? Because the architect knows the true flex of power is not buying something expensive. The ultimate power is having the total capacity to buy it in cash any second, smiling, and deliberately choosing not to. That voluntary restraint, that power at rest, generates a peace of mind that no gold object can equal. To dismantle your need to look rich, you must understand the psychology of the ego. The ego is a black hole that feeds on external validation. If you condition your emotional security on the admiration of others, you have handed the keys to your mental vault to strangers. The problem with seeking society's validation is that society's rules change every day. If today you buy the trendy watch to impress the 99%, tomorrow a new model will come out and your watch will be obsolete. The ego will feel hungry again and force you to spend again. It is a treadmill designed never to stop, whose final destination is financial bankruptcy and chronic clinical anxiety. Ask yourself with absolute coldness, who are you trying to impress? Strangers on the street you won't remember in 5 minutes? Competitors who secretly wish you to fail? Family members who vibrate in scarcity and will ask for loans they will never repay if you show money? Spending the currency of your life to impress people who do not care about you is the saddest act of human submission. The architect transfers the tribunal of his ego inward. He transmutes the need for external approval into unshakable internal security. The sovereign knows exactly what he is worth. He knows the solidity of his iron circle, the thickness of his defensive wall, and the incessant flow of his asymmetric systems. When your internal certainty is 100%, outside opinion becomes worth zero. There is nothing more terrifying and fascinating to the system than an individual who possesses immense power but flatly refuses to exhibit it. You become indecipherable. Ostentation is not only a psychological error, it is a tactical and security suicide. In antiquity, when a king transported gold through a dangerous valley, he didn't put bright flags on the carriages announcing the loot. He covered it with dirty tarps and mixed it with ordinary merchant caravans. He knew visibility is a magnet for death. The modern citizen has forgotten this law of survival. In his desperation for status, he wraps himself in neon lights. The problem is that neon attracts insects and nocturnal predators. When you exhibit wealth, you automatically begin to pay the visibility tax. The social parasite, friends from the past, distant cousins, and acquaintances appearing out of nowhere. They bring business opportunities that are scams or forced charity requests. The legal and fiscal predator, lawyers seeking frivolous lawsuits, tax inspectors looking for irregularities, resentful competitors seeking to sabotage your operation. The emotional saboteur. Resentment is the most toxic emotion. By flaunting, you do not inspire the 99%, you humiliate them, and a humiliated mass will actively seek your downfall to relieve their own cognitive dissonance. Silent wealth is your invisibility cloak. The architect of reality walks the world disguised as an ordinary person. He goes unnoticed in the airport, the restaurant, and the street. No one knows his decisions moved markets this morning. By being invisible, the sovereign neutralizes social resentment, repels parasites before they even know there is blood to suck, and avoids the radar of legal predators. All that friction energy the exhibitionist spends defending his gold, the architect uses to reinvest in the dark, expanding the empire without interruptions. Impunity belongs to the invisible. Fake it till you make it, the amateur's mask. Cheap self-help and pop business culture have popularized one of the most poisonous toxins, fake it till you make it. They tell you to rent a luxury car for meetings, wear suits you can't afford, and talk about millions you don't possess. They hope this projection attracts success. This is the amateur scammer's strategy. Faking does not alter quantum reality. It only fattens your debt and destroys your neurological integrity. When you fake, your subconscious goes on high alert. It knows the account is in the red, the car is rented, and you are a fraud. This dissonance generates chronic imposter syndrome. You live in paranoid terror of being discovered. A paranoid brain cannot execute the OODA loop with lethal speed. Your energy is drained holding up the mask. The sovereign's philosophy is not faking it. It is build it in the most absolute silence until reality speaks for itself. The architect has no problem going to a multi-million-dollar business meeting wearing a clean polo, unbranded pants, and arriving in a utility vehicle. If the counterpart is a member of the true elite, the 1%, he will not judge the watch brand. He will judge the asymmetry of your execution, the depth of your eye contact, the coldness of your unshakable frequency, and the weight of your numbers. Real status cannot be faked. Fake status is loud and needs accessories. Real status, true prestige, is an invisible gravitational force. It is noticeable in how the individual occupies space, his lack of urgency, his tactical silences, and his refusal to impress anyone. The architect does not convince. He notifies facts. The whisper of the 1%, invisible signals of extreme prestige. If the elite don't wear logo clothes or show off sports cars, how do they recognize each other? The 1% uses an infrared communication network. They emit signals undetectable to the 99%, but deafening to those who master the Solomon Code. 1. The sovereignty of time, the luxury of slowness. The labyrinth dweller is always in a hurry. He walks fast, interrupts, and checks his watch, desperate to seem important. The sovereign walks slowly. He projects, I am the absolute owner of my 24 hours. 2. The curation of vocabulary. Prestige is noticeable in the economy of words. The 99% talks too much, using complex corporate jargon. The 1% speaks in short, precise surgical sentences. They do not use 3-syllable words if a 2-syllable one works. 3. Elite health and vitality. The system sells the idea that expensive clothes hide a neglected body. In the upper echelons, unshakable biological health is the ultimate flex of wealth. Perfect posture, clean skin, and calm lethal energy indicate discipline. 4. Indivisible attention, absolute presence. When you interact with a member of the elite, their phone does not vibrate or light up. It is not even on the table. They look you in the eyes and grant you 100% of their concentration. Money shouts because it must ensure it is heard. Wealth whispers because it knows those who matter are already paying attention. There is a mathematical concept in wealth architecture known as FU money, the money of absolute indifference. It is not a fixed amount of millions. It is a mathematical relationship between your vital liabilities and the profitability of your asymmetric systems. F. U money is the exact point where assets generate enough passive cash flow to cover your lifestyle perpetually. When you cross this line, you become untouchable. If a client disrespects you, you leave. If a situation goes against your values, you discard it. You have the power of unconditional withdrawal. Here lies the greatest secret of silent wealth. The fastest way to reach the zero freedom point is to drastically lower the line of your liabilities through strategic austerity. If you need $50,000 a month to sustain a mansion, a rented yacht, and your image, you are a high-maintenance slave. You need to generate fortunes just to not collapse. You have to bow your head to tyrant clients. But if you practice silent wealth and your lifestyle demands only $5,000 a month to operate efficiently, your zero freedom point is easy to reach. Strategic austerity is not living in misery or a scarcity mindset. It is the total elimination of status fat. It is refusing to pay the logo premium. It is reducing your superficial financial footprint to maximize your structural shielding. When you learn to be happy with an excellent book, a nutritious meal, strength training, and a sharp mind, the world has nothing to offer to bribe you and nothing to take to terrify you. You are a mobile fortress. The market knows when a man desperately needs money to pay for luxuries and penalizes him by lowering his price. The market smells when an architect does not care in the slightest if the deal closes or not, and paradoxically throws gold at his feet. Abandoning the need for exhibition is a rite of spiritual initiation. At first, the ego will kick. You will feel residual anxiety when you see other peacocks displaying neon feathers, counting bills, and boasting of unreal trips. Your conditioned mind will want to shout, "I have power too, look at me." That is when you must apply the sovereign brake. You will breathe slowly, remember the unshakable frequency, and watch the spectacle with the patience of a master observing children. You will observe the man with the dazzling watch and know from the bags under his eyes that he suffers from debt insomnia. You will observe the woman recording her champagne bottle and know she is terrified of irrelevance. You will feel tactical compassion for the labyrinth dwellers. And then, you will look toward your own core. You will see the deep, silent vaults of your iron circle. You will see your systems operating in the shadows, generating wealth while you drink water. You will feel the raw, clean power of a brain uncontaminated by public validation. There is no greater flex of power than waking up on a Tuesday, knowing you control your time to the last second, having infinite resources, and walking the city in a simple sweater. You are the wolf walking among the herd, wearing a gray invisibility cloak, enjoying the spectacle of life from the top of the world, in the most deafening and unshakable silence that exists. Money talks. It howls, screams, cries, and throws tantrums. Wealth whispers, and the empire, your empire, simply executes in silence. Chapter 10. The Singularity, the Point of No Return. In the deepest astrophysics, when a massive star exhausts its nuclear fuel, it collapses under the unbearable weight of its own gravity. This collapse is not a destruction, but an extreme compression. Matter becomes so dense, so infinitely heavy, that it tears the very fabric of space and time, forming a black hole. The outer perimeter of this phenomenon is known as the event horizon. It is the mathematical limit where gravity is so absolute that not even light, the fastest entity in the universe, can escape. Once something crosses the event horizon, the laws of traditional physics cease to exist. It is a one-way trip, a point of no return toward the central core, the singularity. The psychological, financial, and spiritual journey you have undertaken throughout this codex obeys the same cosmic mechanics. You have spent your whole life orbiting the labyrinth of the 99%. You operated under the physical laws of scarcity, friction, dependence, and reaction. But as you have integrated the sovereign's codes, isolating your mind, purifying your vocabulary, murdering your need for validation, executing asymmetrically, and shielding your emotional frequency, your intellectual and spiritual density has increased. You have become heavier, not in flesh, but in existential gravity. And now you are standing exactly at the edge of your own event horizon. The singularity is the exact moment, the microsecond of terrifying and sublime clarity when you cross the invisible line. It is the instant your old identity as a spectator or victim of circumstances completely disintegrates. It is crushed by the weight of absolute responsibility. When you cross this point, you can no longer see the world as you saw it before. You can no longer complain about the system because you understand that you are the system. You can no longer blame your parents, your government, or the economy because the illusion of separation has shattered. Crossing the singularity means accepting that everything that exists in your life right now, your bank account, your relationships, your physical state, and your level of peace, has been precipitated, allowed, or summoned by you. For the masses, this understanding is an inferno of intolerable guilt. For the architect, it is the ultimate coronation, because if you are the cause of your ruin, it means that finally, you possess the absolute power to be the cause of your empire. 99% of humanity lives trapped in a lethal perceptual illusion. They believe they inhabit a universe where they are the effect, and the outside world is the cause. Their mental syntax operates like this. Because the economy is bad, cause, I am broke, effect. Because my environment is toxic, cause, I am depressed, effect. Because I lack opportunities, cause, I cannot start a business, effect. This causal inversion is the masterpiece of the labyrinth. As long as the system convinces you that the outside world is the main engine, and you are just the caboose dragged along the tracks of circumstances, You will be infinitely docile. A man who believes his destiny depends on external factors will spend his entire life sitting in the waiting room of history. He will beg for conditions to improve so he can start living. He will wait for the savior politician, the perfect partner, the stroke of luck, or divine intervention, and he will die waiting. The singularity is the act of intellectual violence through which you take that fraudulent equation and forcefully invert it. You assume the throne of the primary cause. The sovereign operates under this new, unshakable axiom. I am the geometric center of my reality. My internal state is the cause. The external world is the effect. When you assume this causal inversion, physical reality is forced to submit. If the market goes into recession, the architect does not say, I am losing money because of the crisis. The architect declares, my current strategy is no longer resonant with the new physical variables. I will adjust my internal vision, find the hidden asymmetry, and project it onto the new board. You stop being a thermometer that simply measures and reacts to the room's temperature, and you become the thermostat that dictates it. This transition is solitary and brutal, because it forever eliminates the right to self-pity. A god does not feel sorry for himself when his creation is defective. He simply fine-tunes the code and creates again. Upon crossing the singularity and assuming your position as primary cause, you will face the final challenge that breaks novices, the phenomenon of reality latency. Imagine standing in front of a huge mirror. You raise your right arm. Immediately, without any delay, the reflection raises its right arm. In the world of light and glass, the response is instantaneous. But the material universe, composed of dense atoms, human institutions, bureaucracy, money, and physical time, is a quantum mirror covered in molasses. When you change internally, when you eliminate lack vocabulary, purge your circle, execute asymmetrically, and raise your standard to the 1%, your physical reflection doesn't change instantly. There is a delay. There is latency. This is the period when your mind is already that of a multimillionaire sovereign, cold and calculating. But when you open your bank account, the numbers still show the scarcity of your past self. When you go outside, you still inhabit the same small apartment and drive the same broken-down vehicle. Your new frequency is already emitting the command signal. But the dense matter of your environment needs time to disintegrate the old structure and reorganize itself to match your new identity. 99% reach this point. Try to be the cause for 3 weeks. See no immediate results in the physical mirror and collapse. They say, this doesn't work. I'm still poor. I'm still alone. In that exact second, by lowering their arm in front of the mirror out of frustration, they have just ordered reality to cancel the request for greatness and return to the state of misery. The singularity demands the patience of the Titan. The architect understands latency. He knows the empty bank account he sees today is not an indicator of his current value, but a delayed photograph of past mediocre decisions. The sovereign keeps his arm raised before the mirror, maintaining the king's posture and the unshakable frequency, no matter what. He does this even though physical reality screams in his ear that he is delusional. He maintains the posture for a month, 6 months, a year. He maintains the causal pressure with such psychic ferocity that, eventually, the quantum mirror of the universe cannot withstand the tension and shatters. Suddenly, like a dam yielding to the weight of the ocean, opportunities, massive capital, elite partners, and the material empire flood his reality. The reflection has finally caught up to the source. He who masters the art of sustaining his vision amidst latency has mastered the game of existence. At the point of no return, you must reprogram your interpretation of pain and difficulty. The labyrinth dweller, trapped in passive victimhood, reacts to tragedy, betrayal, or failure with the slave's eternal litany. Why me? Why is life so unfair? I am a good person. This shouldn't happen to me. This question assumes the universe operates under a human morality system where goodness is rewarded with ease and badness is punished with difficulty. That is an infantile narrative invented for civic control. The universe knows nothing of human morality. The universe knows vibration, cause and effect, force and resistance. When you cross the singularity, the question, why me, is eradicated from your vocal cords. You replace it with the difficulty algorithm. The sovereign understands that physical and mental resistance is not a punishment. It is the calibrating gravity required to sustain the throne. If you want to lift 200 kilos, the iron doesn't hate you when it pushes down, crushing your muscles. It is simply fulfilling its physical function of providing the exact resistance you need to break your muscle fibers and force them to grow stronger. When your empire takes a devastating blow, a product failing, a market collapsing overnight, a partner legally trying to destroy you, you are not being punished by life. You are being calibrated. Reality, like a ruthless blacksmith, is putting the steel of your character into a 1,000-degree fire. It strikes it with a 100-kilo hammer to remove the last bubbles of impurity and weakness left in you. The leader of the 1% receives tragedy with a coldness almost alien to the rest of mortals. He looks at the disaster and says, "The universe is evaluating my ability to operate a system 1,000 times larger than this. If I break from this loss, I certify that I am not worthy of the next level of power. If I solve this riddle with grace and lethality, I unlock the greater vault." Pain simply becomes high-density information. Failure is the way the outside world gives you exact telemetry on where your inner system was deficient. In the singularity, there are no tragedies. There is only data. So far, much of your evolution has consisted of escaping or isolating yourself from the collective matrix, the noisy labyrinth designed by others. You have learned not to consume their information or speak their language. But escape is only the sovereign's first phase. The ascetic flees to the mountain to be at peace, but the ascetic does not change the world. He only changes his location. The architect does not seek to flee permanently to a cave. The final phase of the singularity is the moment you begin programming your own source code and build a micromatrix around yourself. It is not enough to be free inside the labyrinth. You must raise new walls, establish your own physical, economic, and social laws, and become the architect of a new reality for those loyal to your blood and flag. This micromatrix is sustained by the pillars we have discussed, but now executed at a dynastic level. 1. Autonomous economy. You no longer depend on a single thread of the global economy. Your micromatrix has companies, disconnected investments, safe haven assets, and cash flow systems operating under your rules. When the global economy sneezes, your internal system does not even feel the breeze. You are your own central bank. 2. Intellectual jurisdiction. You dictate what information is allowed to exist within your domains. You will educate your lineage and lieutenants with the mental models of emperors. You strictly forbid the ideological viruses of weakness and victimhood that infect public schools. Your last name becomes synonymous with an intellectual standard unattainable for the masses. 3. Projected cultural gravity. The point will come when you no longer have to adapt to the room when you enter. The room will bend to adapt to you. The micromatrix generates a dense electromagnetic field of authority. External agents unwittingly begin to speak in a lower tone, respect your silence, and submit to your negotiation terms. You have stopped being a player on another man's board. Now you are inviting others to play on your board, under the relentless pressure of your own gravity. Crossing the point of no return is no walk through sunny, flowered gardens. It is necessary to warn you about the side effect of the singularity, the icy vertigo of absolute freedom. Slavery, despite all its suffering and humiliation, has a very perverse hidden psychological benefit. It is comfortable. A slave does not have to make strategic decisions. A slave does not have to worry about bankruptcy risk, complex lawsuits, or the collapse of international markets. The slave only has to obey, complain, and wait for the master to give him his monthly ration of food and security. If something goes wrong, the slave has someone to blame. Absolute freedom, the crown you have claimed, strips you of that comfort forever. When you assume total control, when you are the cause of your matrix, you realize the sky above you is empty of supervisors. There is no one above you to fix your mistakes. There is no safety net beneath the tightrope you walk at 1,000 meters high. If your asymmetric investment strategy fails and you lose millions, the only culprit looks at you from the mirror. If a competitor launches a smear campaign, you cannot cry injustice. You must assume that your counterintelligence service and your public relations were deficient. That level of total exposure breaks the weak in hours. They feel the weight of the abyss and beg to return to the chains. But for you who have crossed the singularity, that weight is not torture, it is the oxygen of the gods. The paralyzing anxiety of the subject mutates in you and becomes a level of cold and predatory alertness. You love the pressure. You love knowing your life hangs by the thin thread of your own IQ and speed. You traded safe misery for majestic danger. As you solidify your micromatrix and power begins to flow through you with the naturalness of a river, you will experience the dissolution of the last obstacle, your old superficial ego. The ego in the initial stages of your awakening served as your armor. You used your proud I to separate yourself from the masses, to feel superior, to give yourself the courage to isolate and endure the mockery. You clung to your identity as an empire builder, a sovereign, as a necessary battle shield to survive the corridor of the void. But in the absolute epicenter of the singularity, even that armor must fall. You realize that you, your physical body, and your personal history are not the true source of power. They are simply the perfectly tuned instrument through which the intelligence of the universe decides to manifest greatness. This is the state of aegis, the divine shield, or transcendence. It is the moment you stop trying to force the world through stubbornness and friction and move into a state of tactical surrender. You do not surrender to external circumstances. You surrender to your own mastery. Your financial moves, social interactions, and legacy decisions lose beginners' rigid aggressiveness and acquire the master's fluid lethality. You are no longer at war with the labyrinth. Being at war implies recognizing the enemy can hurt you. The consummate architect does not fight the labyrinth. He simply walks over its walls. Money flows to you, alliances are forged, and prestige is consolidated, not because you struggle 1,000 hours a week sweating blood. It happens because your life's geometric structure is perfectly aligned with the physics of asymmetric value. The universe has no other logical route but to deposit the gold at your feet. You have stopped doing success to becoming the irrefutable condition where success occurs naturally. We reach the end of the map. Behind you are the muffled echoes of the great illusion, the hysteria of public opinion, the ambition vampires, and the graveyards of analysis paralysis. Ahead is only the blank page of the rest of your existence and that of your descendants. You have devoured the ancient code and translated it into the ballistics of modern economic, psychological, and spiritual war. You have the map, you have the steel, and you have the frequency. The singularity cannot be explained to those who haven't crossed it. If you returned today to your old table with the 99% and tried to explain the world's optics from the primary cause, they would think you were crazy or dark and insensitive. Leave them in their ignorance. Their time is not your time. You no longer have the mission to save those who insist on loving their chains. Your sole mission now is to hold the crown and expand your micromatrix's light as far as your blood's will reaches. At this exact point, the entire universe falls silent, awaiting your opening move on the three-dimensional board of reality. Everything before has been merely the training phase. Close this text. Get out of your chair. Look around with the eyes of the absolute architect, the man or woman who knows with total, icy certainty that every atom of their environment belongs to them by right of intellectual conquest. Cross the line and never look back. The singularity is yours. Let your reign begin. You have reached the last page of this escape manual. If you have read and absorbed the frequency of these 10 chapters, the architecture of your mind is no longer the same as when you started. The source code has been rewritten. The invisible chains that tied you to the mediocrity of the 99%, chronic fatigue, the desperate need for validation, the terror of chaos, and analysis paralysis have been cut from the root. You are no longer a passive spectator in the rat race. You have looked directly into the eyes of the system and decoded its great illusion. You understand that the world is not an accidental chaos, but a designed board, and from this instant, you flatly refuse to be a piece moved by other people's hands. You have claimed the architect's chair. The last door of the labyrinth is not locked. It is wide open. The only thing holding you back was the fear of the immensity of your own power. Today, that fear has transmuted into a cold and lethal certainty. Sue, the integrated codex, your new operative reality. Before closing this text and facing the universe, seal in your neurology the unshakable pillars of the elite to which you now belong. This is the contract you sign with your own destiny. Your attention is the new gold. You will never again give away your vital energy to the algorithms of outrage or the drama of the masses. Your time is a defensive moat, and your concentration is a laser that sculpts empires. Curation over exhibitionism. You have murdered the peacock. Your lifestyle no longer seeks cheap applause or documenting every step you take. You live in the majesty of privacy. You create an aesthetic of absolute excellence, not to show it off, but so your environment forcefully raises your standard. You project authority by maintaining mystery. The word is a scalpel. Your vocabulary has been purged. You do not complain, you do not try, and you do not wait. You decree, assume, and execute. Your word is the physical law your reality is obliged to obey. The ice shield. In the face of crisis and collapse, you are absolute zero. While the world panics, you observe, calculate, and buy for pennies what the scared sell out of terror. You are immune to chaos. The table of kings. Your social circle is now a fortress. You have expelled the vampires of your ambition without guilt or remorse. You surround yourself only with minds that force you to evolve, operating under the gravity of inevitable success. Asymmetric speed. Perfectionism is dead. You execute with 70% of the information, launch your work into the fire of the market, take the hit, correct, and dominate while your competitors remain eternally paralyzed in the planning phase. Third, the end of nostalgia and the assumption of the throne. Crossing this threshold requires a necessary mourning. You must say goodbye to the weak version of yourself. That version that sought to fit in, that wanted to please everyone and apologized for having boundless ambition, must remain buried in the labyrinth. You cannot take it with you to the territory of the singularity. From today on, productive solitude will be your alchemy workshop. Silence will be your best counselor. You will notice that you interact with the physical world. You will do business, launch projects, accumulate capital, but you will be operating from a frequency the masses cannot touch. You will be indecipherable to them. They will see you move with terrifying calm and call your asymmetric results luck. You and the members of your iron circle will know that it is the simple and pure physics of sovereignty. Wealth whispers, authority does not ask permission, and true power is exercised from the shadows. Fourth, your signature on the canvas of the world. The knowledge you have acquired in these chapters is highly radioactive. If you close this book and return to your old routine, to consume digital trash, to doubt your ideas and seek the approval of the mediocre, this text will become poison for your mind. Because now you know the truth. Ignorance is no longer a valid excuse. You know how the game works, and if you choose to keep losing, it will be your choice. But you will not turn back. You have felt the weight of the invisible crown. You have understood that the universe is wet clay waiting for the pressure of hands that do not tremble. There is nothing more to read. There are no more courses to take, to be ready. The preparation phase has definitively concluded. The event horizon is behind you. Take a deep breath of the cold, crystalline air of your new freedom. Open your eyes. Step out of the shadows, architect, and start building.